One moment, still working through a YouTube issue.
Okay.
One more moment. Thank you for your patience.
Laura, a couple quick questions.
All right, we are unable to make it to YouTube for some reason. So if you know anyone who was wanting to participate but didn't want to speak, let me, if you email planning@orcity.org, that's planning@orcity.org, we can send them the Zoom link. They don't have to speak. If you're on the Zoom link, you can also just watch. And you are free to start whenever, Chair Schlagenhofer.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Roy. All right, let's begin. I will call to order the Monday, July 12th, 2021 meeting of the Oregon City Planning Commission. Before we begin, I'd like to do a quick roll call so we have on the record who all is here, which commissioners, in no particular order. Commissioner Staggs?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Stoll?
Here.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Here.
Commissioner West? Make sure you're not muted.
Here,
Thank
sorry.
you. And Commissioner Gage?
Here.
All right, and Chair Schlagenhofer, I am here. Feel silly saying that. All right, before we begin, I have a side note. I just wanted to suggest, in an effort to stay organized, that members of the public and applicants, please turn off your video and audio. I mean, mute yourself until your agenda item and stay muted unless you are speaking. Staff can mute you, but they cannot unmute you. So I will ask you to unmute yourself before you speak. All right. Okay, and before we begin, I don't think we have any, but are there any public comments on items not on the record? Has anything shown up?
Staff has not received any requests.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay. We'll go straight into agenda item number 1. It is actually we have 2 public hearings today. We're going to go straight to number 1. It's a general land use application 21-00019, conditional use 21-00002, the Father's Heart Street Ministry, conditional use permit for warming shelter. It's a quasi-judicial hearing, so I will start with the virtual script. 2 public hearings on land use applications are scheduled tonight. Our role is to conduct a public hearing and to make decisions about the matter before us. In making those decisions, we must apply the applicable codes and laws and cannot vary from or change those laws or codes. Members of the Planning Commission are to be unbiased. Before the start of the hearing, I will ask the Planning Commissioners whether they have any potential conflicts, such as family, financial, or business relationships with any of the applicants or with regard to the land in question. I will also ask whether any of the Planning Commissioners have discussed the application in question with any of the parties or have independent knowledge of relevant facts, such as from a visit to the site in question. Any member of the audience may question any Planning Commissioner about their disclosures. A staff report has been prepared for each application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the Planning Commission will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps are shown on the Planning Commission website. Public testimony will be called on in the order it was requested in advance of the meeting. If you have not emailed city staff at planning@orcity.org to request to speak and would like to testify, please raise your virtual or physical hand when I ask if there are others in the audience who would like to participate. For the record, please begin all testimony stating your name and city of residence. If you would like to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please state your mailing address or email address. Testimony and evidence should be directed towards the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those as addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. Any person may submit written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the planning hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to the city staff while the record is open. If they are not given to staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the hearing is closed. If the Planning Commission makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised on the record for the consideration of the City Commission or LUBA or both. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient detail and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond to, the issue will not be deemed appealable to the City Commission or State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of an application to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient detail to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Now, we will open the record for Oregon City file number GLUA-21-00019 and CU 21-00002, the Father's Heart Street Ministry conditional use permit for warming shelter. We will now ask each planning commissioner if they have any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, bias, or any other statement to declare, or if they have visited the site. If there was a site visit, the planning commissioner must declare what he or she perceived. And I'm going to go in the same order as I went before. Commissioner Staggs, do you have any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, bias, or any other statement to declare or have visited the site? And make sure you're unmuted. You are muted, Commissioner Staggs.
Hate it when that happens. No, I don't. I have none of those, and I did not visit the site.
Okay. Commissioner Stoll.
No conflicts of interest, no ex parte contact, no bias affecting this application. I did visit the site. It was a Saturday afternoon, I think. It was closed. There was no one around.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Mitchell.
No conflicts of interest, no bias, and no ex parte contacts. I did visit the site yesterday, and my intention was just to refresh my memory as to how close the neighboring homes are. And for the record, I'll say that my recollection was they were as close as I remembered them being.
All right, thank you. Commissioner West.
I have no conflict of interest, no ex parte contact, and no bias. Even though I live in the McLaughlin neighborhood and not too far from it, I don't know if I live within 300 feet, but I live close by. But I know through the years living here, I know people on all sides of this issue. And I did drive by the Father's Heart to see what they had set up in the back, looking to see if they had any bathrooms or fencing between the homes.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gage.
I have no ex parte contact, no conflict of interest, no bias. I did visit the site. I pulled into the parking lot over the weekend, just looked around a bit. Only thing there is a business pod and a place to, give donations. So didn't get to see, any more than that, but did see the site.
Thank you. And for myself, I have no conflicts of interest, no ex parte contacts, no bias. I did visit the site a couple times, but the hours they're open are the same hours I work. So I had no way to go there during business hours. I went there in the evening one day. I went there in the morning on a Sunday. Same observation as Commissioner Mitchell. I saw nobody there. I didn't see any garbage. Clearly things can change day to day, but what I saw, I didn't see a whole lot. So that's my experience. Would anybody in the audience like to question any of the commissioners on their statements? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. And we will now commence with the staff report. I don't know who this is.
Thank you.
Oh, Liliana, thank you. Okay.
I'm Diliana Vasilieva. I'm the assistant planner for the city, and I will be presenting the staff report for the Father's Heart Street Ministry conditional use permit for an overnight warming shelter. Because this is an application for a shelter, there are some federal regulations and protections at play. So before I get into my presentation, I wanted to give the city attorney the floor to give us a very quick overview of those additional protections, federal protections that we need to be keeping in mind.
Thank you. I very quickly wanted to offer a quick overview of the Fair Housing Act and Americans with Disabilities Act protections. The Fair Housing Act provides that the city and anybody else can't discriminate against individuals based on personal circumstances, such as race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. And this relates to access for housing as well. So individual personal circumstances cannot play a role in our evaluation of the conditional use criteria here. We are strictly limited to evaluation based on the approval standards and the use that is proposed. Further, the Americans with Disabilities Act protects housing access for individuals with disabilities, and this includes mental illness and substance dependency issues. So the characteristics or circumstances of individuals who may seek shelter in My Father's Heart cannot be considered. So we need to be focused on the use itself and the criteria, and not the characteristics of the people who will be seeking shelter. So I just wanted to offer that as a little reminder, and I'm happy to answer any questions as we move through this review. Yep. Commissioner Stoll.
Yeah, can you refresh my memory? Was there some law passed in the last legislature about siting of homeless shelters and zoning? I seem to remember something, but I don't remember the details. I don't know if it was proposed and not passed, or what the final result was, but I just have a vague recollection of that.
And you're talking about in the Oregon legislature?
Yeah, Oregon legislature, yeah.
I don't recall, but I believe that staff is asking for a continuance, so I will look into that further, because there have been a lot of housing bills, and there may have been something about expediting review, but let me look into it further.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I just switched to headphones, so I wanted to make sure everyone still can hear me. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so the property is developed with the Father's Heart Street Ministry, which is a day use shelter. Sorry, I have my slides backwards here. The subject site is located at the corner of 12th Street and Washington Street in Oregon City. It is approximately 1/2 acre in size, and it's developed with an existing building and parking lot. It's zoned mixed use corridor, MUC1, which is that orange color in the middle. Adjacent properties or surrounding properties include residential zoning. The R3.5 district is shown in brown, and the R6 district is shown in yellow. There is also some institutional zoning, which is shown in light blue on the map, and mixed use downtown zoning in the surrounding area, which is the darker teal or gray color. The property is developed with the Father's Heart Warming Shelter, which is a day use shelter serving no and low income populations since 2012. For the past 4 years, each year, they have also received approval through an emergency resolution from the City Commission, which has allowed them to operate as an emergency nighttime warming shelter on nights that the temperature is forecasted to fall below 33 degrees, including wind chill. Most recently, this past winter, they served over 2,100 guests over the course of 43 nights. So with this application, the applicant is requesting a conditional use permit, which would allow them to operate as a warming shelter without having to ask the City Commission for an emergency resolution to allow them to do that each year. The definition of warming shelter is within our code, and it is a shelter operating between the hours of 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. when the outside temperature is predicted to be 33 degrees or below, including wind chill factor as measured by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Before I go over some of the applicable criteria for this application, I wanted to reiterate a little bit the scope of this project, or rather what is outside of the scope of our review. So number one, the day use shelter is a legal non-conforming use that is existing and allowed to continue and is not part of this review. This review tonight is only for the temporary nighttime warming shelter. Number two, there are no alterations to the building. So any building design standards or physical dimensional standards that we would typically review as far as the building or parking lot are not applicable to this review. If they were proposing to make some of those alterations, then we would be reviewing them to make sure that anything new is in compliance with the current code. But because they're not proposing to do that, all of those standards are outside of the scope of our review. And then finally, the Father's Heart is located in a non-designated structure in the McLaughlin Conservation District. Historic design guidelines don't apply to non-designated structures unless new construction is proposed on site. Since no new construction is proposed, these historic design guidelines or any kind of historic review is not applicable to this conditional use permit. The use within a building is not regulated by the historic overlay chapter, only the building design. So as with any other application, your recommendation or your decision is based on applicable criteria within our code. So I will quickly go over the criteria, and I apologize, I have some text heavy slides, but I tried to highlight some of the pertinent text. So with the conditional use permit, we are reviewing that the characteristics of the site are suitable for the proposed use. We are reviewing that the use will not alter the character of the surrounding area in a manner which substantially limits, impairs, or precludes the use of surrounding properties. We are reviewing to make sure that the proposal satisfies the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan. In this case, some of the applicable goals and policies of the comprehensive plan include citizen involvement, efficient use of land, neighborhood livability, affordable housing, and transportation. With a conditional use permit, the Planning Commission can also stipulate restrictions or conditions to uphold the spirit and intent of the zoning ordinance and mitigate adverse effect upon the neighboring properties by reason of the use, extension, construction, or alteration allowed. The Planning Commission also can limit or prohibit building openings within 50 feet of a residential property in a residential zone if the openings will cause excessive glare, noise, or traffic. And then in addition to the general conditional use permit standards that I went over, there are also criteria specific to shelters. So a shelter is required to maintain a written community engagement plan, which includes information about the description of purpose and scope of services of the shelter, population to be housed at the shelter, and the process and criteria for selection of guests, bed capacity for nightly guests, hours of operations and curfew if applicable, 24-hour contact information, and explanation of how the shelter will address concerns and complaints. Shelters are also required to hold a meeting with the community prior to commencing operation, and a minimum of once a year, each year thereafter, to go over the community engagement plan and provide an opportunity for dialogue between the shelter and neighborhood residents. So staff does believe that the applicable criteria are met And your agenda packet included a staff report, which included a recommendation of approval for the conditional use permit. However, we realized that after the agenda was sent out, that the public notice incorrectly identified this as a type 3 application rather than a type 4 application, even though conditional use permits typically are a type 3 application. Our code requires that conditional use permits for shelters get reviewed through the type 4 process. So our notice was incorrect, and for that reason, we're requesting a continuance to the August 9th Planning Commission hearing, which will allow us to renotice the application with the correct information. We've also had a lot of comments that have come in over the past few days, and a lot of people tonight who are here to speak about this application. So that will also give us an opportunity to review all the comments that have come in, hear out the public testimony tonight, and come back to you with a revised staff report on August 9th, which will include responses to all of the public comments that have been received, and may include some revised or more detailed findings and potentially some additional conditions of approval. We do have some comments to enter into the record. There were comments that were sent to the Planning Commission on Friday in an email, and over the weekend we received 3 additional comments, which were sent out this afternoon. And the August 9th Planning Commission agenda will include those comments as an attachment and include responses to all of the comments we've received. So I'm happy to answer any questions since we're coming back with the revised staff report. You know, it may be more appropriate to wait until the revised staff report to get too into the weeds, but I can answer any questions that the Planning Commission has. And then we have the applicant here, as well as a lot of public comments that are waiting to provide their testimony as well.
All right, thank you, Diliana. Yeah, I would like to give the commissioners a chance to ask any questions that they maybe need some clarification, but like you said, without going too far into the weeds, since we do need to focus on applicable criteria, and this is going to be continued because it needs to be changed from a type 3 to a type 4 notification for the neighbors. So with that said, is there anyone that would like to ask staff any questions? Any of the commissioners? Commissioner Stoll.
In the applicant's application packet, it references Appendix G, the draft community engagement plan. I was unable to find that anywhere in the application packet.
Yeah, that response was actually included in the narrative. They, provided a response to each of the criteria for the community engagement plan. But we did receive a few comments that the actual attachment was missing. So we'll make sure to have that attachment within for the August 9th hearing. And we also have a condition right now to provide a finalized community engagement plan after they hold their community meeting. So yeah, we'll make sure to get that.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Staggs, I see your hand.
Could you briefly summarize what physical, if there are any physical things that are proposed to be sitting on the property that's new from what's not there now?
There are none that I'm aware of. So no physical alterations as far as like landscaping, parking lot changes, any building design or building details are being proposed under this review.
So all of the conditional use application is for activities to be held in the existing building that's already there.
Exactly. The conditional use application is for the use itself. Any physical changes would be reviewed through a site plan and design review application where we review the physical site and the design of the building. But they're not proposing that with this application. So the submittal didn't include that site plan and design review aspect.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any hands up in my screen. I'm not seeing any hands. Am I missing anyone?
Chair Schlagenhofer, you do have someone from the public who wants to speak, but if you wanted to stick with the order, we could do the time for the applicant's presentation followed by the public comments, and we have a list of public comments in the order in which they're submitted as well.
Is it a new public comment or is it a specific question for staff? What are you saying?
I would recommend holding any comments from the public until after the applicant does their presentation, because sometimes they'll answer them, and then we'll always come back after that, or can answer any questions from the community.
Okay, what is that? What is that person's name? I want to write it down.
Mr. J. Pierce, if he's not on the testimony list already.
Okay, is he a call-in or is he on Zoom?
On video right now. So Mr. Pierce, we can add you to the testimony, and then we'll get to you in our order.
I'm already listed on the testimony.
Oh, great, wonderful.
Oh, he's first.
The question of staff related to that point. We're asking about physical changes. It's quite clear that it will add a lot of hours of operation. That is a physical change.
Okay, all right. I'm going to make a note of that, but we really need to keep the order of operations here, and we need to go through the applicant, and then we'll go straight to you.
And then Chair Schlagenhofer, just last point of order for process. Did you want me to use the sign that we've been using?
Yes, please.
Okay. Perfect, thank you.
Once we get there, Ms. Turway is going to be holding up that sign, which lets you know you've got 30 seconds to go. The applicant will have 15 minutes. Neighborhood associations and government agencies will have 5, and then individuals will have 3 minutes. So when you see that, you've got 30 seconds to go. Thank you. All right, so I think we're good with our commissioner questions for the staff. We're going to go to the applicant, and you've got 15 minutes if you need it.
Hi, this is Marty Gant, president of the Father's Heart Street Ministry. And I'm going to delay really responding until August 9th and hearing all the public testimonies and all the things going on. The big thing that I think is important is that we've been operating successfully. And there's a lot of misnomers and misconceptions about what's really going on in the building. We encourage people to come visit us. I know it's tough during certain hours, but we're working hard to work not only with the public, but with the clients. COVID changed the dynamic a great deal. We couldn't have as many people, but there's also a lot of rehousing projects going on, which is going to change the amount of people that really are going to need services. We don't have a number on that yet, but we're reviewing that constantly. I want to thank everybody for being concerned, but we're concerned too. And we do think that we operate prudently. We operate with the public in mind, the neighborhood. We really do care about what's going on. And I'm going to pass any other comments to the rest of my staff, but I would be open to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Do any of the commissioners have any questions for Marty? Mr. Gant, I'm sorry. I'm scrolling. I'm seeing no hands. Am I missing anyone?
Yeah, Commissioner Stoll, I'd like to ask a couple questions.
Absolutely, go ahead.
In the staff presentation, it said that you served 2,100 people over 43 nights in this past winter. Is that right? Are those numbers correct?
I think that number, and Jennifer is on the call too, I think the number is over the past 4 years, not over the past season. Because of COVID, we were limited much.
Okay.
Jennifer, you can verify that?
That was the basis of my question. The numbers the math didn't work for COVID restricted.
Yeah,
occupancy,
it's
so.
over past, it's the numbers for the past 4 years.
So 2,100 people over 43 nights over 4 years.
That's the, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Stoll. Am I missing anyone else? Okay. All right, do we have anybody, I know we do. Do we have anybody from a neighborhood association? that would like
Commissioner
to-
Staggs has his hand up.
I missed it. Commissioner Staggs.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Marty, could you tell us if your organization did not exist there, or actually, let me put it this way. If the conditional use permit is not granted, how does that impact what you guys do?
Well, that's a tough one to answer without knowing what exactly we're going to do, because what's going to happen is we're going to go back to the city and ask for an emergency warming center, which we've done 4 years in a row because we're trying to save lives. The point is we want to get those at risk, mental health, elderly, those with pre-existing conditions, all those things. If they don't have a place to be when it's cold, we want to provide that. And so the city really wants us to go through this process, and we want to go through this process. You know, and the codes changed, I believe, and I'm not really good at the historical piece, but the codes changed 4 years ago as far as a need to go through this process, as far as emergency warming, because we operated before without it and without any issue or problems. And then we were approached like, we have to go through this process, da, da, da. So we did that in, I think it was 2016. So we always go before them like this 13th, 12th of November, and we want to open because everything forecasts that it's going to be cold. And we're contracted with the county to do this November 1 through April 30th. So they view us as a warming shelter also. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's the process.
Yeah, you did. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Gann? Okay, I don't see any. Okay, any member of a neighborhood association or government agency that would like to speak?
We did not have anyone signed up as such on the request to speak forms.
Okay, I saw a lot of documentation from a neighborhood association and a lot of neighbors, but as far as a speaker, I was not sure if there was going to be someone here, and it appears they're not. Okay. Members of the public, I've got quite the list, and we are going to, you will each have 3 minutes. Last time, I think I may have engaged with folks a little too much, and we've got so many people and so much stuff to go through tonight. We're going to have to go straight from one participant straight into the next one. I apologize, but we've got to get through 14 people. So with that said, Mr. J. Pierce, please begin by stating your city of residence. You don't have to give us your address unless you want a notice of a decision mailed to you or your email address. And make sure you're not muted, and you've got 3 minutes.
I'm Jay Pierce, P-E-A-R-C-E, and I'm an Oregon City resident, contiguous to the Father's Heart. And I think I also will reserve my comment, the bulk of my comments. I would have liked to have seen and heard about the staff report here this evening. Obviously, there's a lot of information to be digested and reevaluated. The main point we have in the neighborhood is that this is a Class C office. It was not designated, it was originally zoned without any of the kind of review we're doing here. And we feel it was inappropriate in the beginning and continues to be. And there are quite a number of sections that I've responded to in writing vis-a-vis section 2 and section 4 of the initial sections of the code, which relate directly to the character of the neighborhood and the use for which the facility is being put now. And I would agree with the commissioners that if you visit on a weekend or after hours, yeah, there's nobody there. But you have to visit during the impact zone times when things are really happening there to understand why the neighborhood is so adamantly opposed to any expansion of services. But I'll reserve my full comments for the August 9th meeting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pierce. Going straight to Bibi Bachman. Please state your city of residence, your name, and if you would like a notification of decision, your address or your email address, and make sure you're not muted. Thank you.
I'm actually B. Bachman and Richard Kaiser. We live together, and our address is 1206 Washington Street. We're direct neighbors to the east side of the Father's Heart Street Ministry. And I also would like to reserve my time for the August 9th meeting to speak.
Okay, before we call the next person, I just want to identify that for some reason the chat feature function is active. Please refrain from posting anything in the chat. We did have someone from the Murrays post to everyone that Wendy Marshall is from the Neighborhood Association and completed the report. And so if someone is speaking on behalf of the Neighborhood Association, just announce yourself before you speak and I'll adjust the time for that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I responded to that because I was looking for that name in the list. I was afraid I missed her as a participant, but I didn't see her in here. All right. Mr. Richard Kaiser, please state your name, city of residence, address if you want a notice of decision, and you have 3 minutes. Please unmute yourself.
Oh, that's me again. I just spoke. I am.
Okay, I'm confused.
Yeah, sorry about that. BB's at work, so I'm kind of speaking for her. So.
Not a problem. I get confused easily. There's a big list and a lot of names on it. All right, Mrs. Sharon Nicholson, state your name, city of residence, and your address if you'd like a notice of decision. And
yes, I am. Hi, I am Sharon Nicholson. I live at 1114 Washington Street. I'm on the corner, right across the street from Father's Heart. I think I will reserve comment until the next meeting. I think basically based on the application that was submitted and the staff report, it seems as though it's clear. Our observations are that the criteria for a successful completion of the application was not met. And I think our supporting documentation and comments kind of highlights that. But I will reserve my additional comments until we have that second meeting.
Thank you very much. Mr. Clint Nicholson, state your name, city of residence, and if you would like a notice of decision, your address. Please unmute yourself.
Yes, good evening. Clint Nicholson, resident of Oregon City, same address as Sharon, just across the street, corner of Washington and 12th. I'm going to reserve most of my comments as well, but certainly echoing what's been said so far in regards to that the application does not meet the criteria, and I'd like to reserve the rest of the time for the fellow public and reserve the rest of my comment for the next meeting.
Thank you very much. Ms. Christine Lefevre. Please state your name, city of residence, and then your address if you'd like a notice of decision.
Hello, I'm Christine Lefevre. My husband and I live on Washington Street, just a block from 7-Eleven on the same side of the street. We have lived here since 2006. My interest in this case is to show that the very existence of the Father's Heart is detrimental to the well-being of our neighborhood. By the very size of the Father's Heart, I see that their approach to helping others is not a great help at all to the overall homeless situation. This organization should be somewhere with professionals to deal with the bulk of their visitors. Instead, we now have planted right here in our beautiful historic neighborhood a free-for-all lure for disreputable people to come and hang out. Police from neighboring towns and cities have been known to drop transients off at the Father's Heart. A reputation has grown, and now it is shared among these transients that Oregon City has a place for them. We on Washington Center and High Streets are nearest to downtown Oregon City, where there is a transit center which brings the transients easily into our neighborhood. And for that very reason, I do not regard their current location to be at all a good presence to we who are the taxpayers. The number of these transients has multiplied exponentially yearly by the lure of the Father's Heart. On 2 different occasions, I opened my door to our front porch only to find a homeless man sleeping there. These were 2 separate times with 2 different men. Both times the weather was warm. Often someone stashes debris or even treasured bags of returnable cans and bottles in our Oregon grape hedge. On one occasion, our stairwell to the basement was used by someone who left a brown paper bag with an empty bottle of alcohol of some sort. At that same time, excrement was left in the stairwell too, and it is not likely that an animal went down there for that purpose. I see obvious homeless men walking up and down the street to and from 7-Eleven. On the one occasion when I called the police, I was walking under the bridge to take the steps to downtown. This was early in the morning. A man was sleeping in that tunnel and I was alarmed at his presence. I do not know if the police did anything. There have been 2 different men who roam up and down Washington Street screaming and yelling profanities, to where I have on numerous occasions run outside to see that no one is being harmed. They seem to obviously suffer from Tourette's syndrome or perhaps schizophrenia, and some of the things they shout as loudly as they can are not only offensive but violent. On July 4th this year, while in my front yard, a peculiar man came walking down the street in the middle of the northbound lane, expounding with certainty about what seemed like courtroom talk. He was carrying a garden tool long like a hoe. With his right arm, he would heist the tool vehemently into the air. He appeared to be oblivious to anyone else. Meanwhile, a car came driving up behind him and had to swerve into the oncoming lane to proceed. Incidentally, northbound is the way to the Father's Heart. The good neighbor policy doesn't hold with me. Good neighbors do not behave in such a manner. The proposal by the Father's Heart will indeed alter the character of the surrounding area by virtue of the transient beings continuing to infiltrate our neighborhood. There. What?
Thank you, Mrs. Lefevre. Mrs. Mary Stevers, please state your name, your city of residence, and your address or email address if you'd like a notice of decision.
Mary Stivers, Stivers. I'm in Oregon City and I'd like it emailed. It's marycarolyn@gmail.com. I oppose permits for the night warming shelter at the Father's Heart. My response is based on Section 4, specifically their good neighbor policy, which they have not met. If a temporary warming shelter is approved, the clients will have to leave the Father's Heart at 7 a.m. The facility doesn't reopen until 9:45. This gap is the time children are leaving for schools and waiting for the school bus. Where do we expect the people leaving the Father's Heart to be during this time? In the neighborhood. Why would they go anywhere else? The good neighbor policy has never been actively enforced. Once the people leave the facility, they're on their own. If the policy is not enforced now, why would anyone expect it to be enforced when more people are trying to use the shelter? I have lived in my home for over 31 years, well before the Father's Heart moved in around the corner, and I've seen a lot of changes to what used to be a safe and peaceful neighborhood. Since they opened, there have been many instances of people who use or try to use their services who have committed violations against both local laws and the good neighbor policy. An alley runs along the side of my home and yard. I've found too many alcohol containers that are empty, discarded there to count. I've also found used syringes on my parking strip. Strangers have come in my backyard at night. Because of this, I had to have a different fence installed at a great expense. Men come and sit on my front porch and refuse to leave. Men have come to my door begging. None of these things ever happened before the Father's Heart moved in. They may have a policy of not letting people in who are either drunk or on drugs or who possess either of these. But when they turn these people away, the people simply turn the corner and come into the neighborhood often in front of my house or onto my porch, and I don't feel safe when this happens. They're definitely not quiet. I've heard many, many arguments and fights directly in front of my home, and the people were not from the neighborhood. I've had to call the police on several occasions, including once when one man threatened to kill the other in a tone of voice I really believed. I interviewed several neighbors and businesses in the area. One resident, a woman, gets off work at 10:30 at night. Her door's on the side of her residence facing her yard, and she's come home in the dark to find clients of the Father's Heart sleeping in her yard. Several other neighbors have been threatened and chased. Another lady has been verbally abused and physically threatened. Eateries I've spoken with state they have their garbage cans gone through and garbage scattered around. Clients of the Father's Heart accost patrons and beg for money and then refuse to leave. Others use the garbage cans as a bathroom. Both neighbors and businesses have had things stolen. I repeat, if the policy is not enforced now, why would anyone expect it to be enforced when more people use the facility? And I urge you to deny this request by the Father's Heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Stivers. Miss Allison, hope it's famous. Please state your name, city of residence, and if you would like a notice of decision mailed to you, your physical address or your email address, and make sure you're not muted. Thank you.
Allison is not here at this meeting, but my husband, Colin Murray, signed up to read a statement from her. If that is permitted, she has a direct statement that she would like someone to read for her.
I'm not sure. Ms. Turley, can you help me out? What's the procedure if there's a fill-in?
That's fine.
Okay, go ahead.
My name is Colin Murray. I live at 612 12th Street, and I'm reading this for Allison Foster. In her words, I've been involved with homeless outreach since 2008. I volunteered with Operation Night Watch Portland for about 8 years. One of my main reasons for moving to the Father's Heart in 2015 was proximity. The other from concerns surrounding the murder of my co-volunteer by a sex offender guest and the failure of Operation Night Watch to begin background checking. I served at the Father's Heart for about 3 years in the clothing closet and as a shower attendant. I want to lead with the statement that I have a passion to serve this population. I believe that our life purpose needs to include loving our neighbors as ourselves. The question is, who is our neighbor and how can this best be accomplished? The houseless are certainly our neighbors and obviously need help. However, our giving should not enable people. Giving needs to have structure and be matched by effort on the part of the people we are serving. We need to build the sustainability rather than dependency and be facilitators of their growth. A nonprofit should not only effectively contain damage to the surrounding environment, but also actively help individuals move toward dignified self-sufficiency. We need to love people enough to get to the core of their reason for being houseless and address it appropriately. The addicted need to be held accountable and aided toward treatment. The mentally ill need to be treated, and the able but unwilling to work need to be given a time limit for handouts, then cut off. Except for the truly incapable, they need to be active participants in their own betterment. When we do for others what they are capable of doing for themselves, we not only cripple them, but take resources away from the truly needy. I have had the opportunity to get to know many of the regular guests at the Father's Heart personally, outside of the shelter setting. Many are likable, however, most are at best opportunists and professional takers. Many are active addicts and engaged in regular criminal activity. I can give more details if anyone is interested. When I became aware of the ongoing struggles of the literal neighbors of the Father's Heart, I was led to examine my position on their presence here. Because truly helping these people is beyond the scope of what this nonprofit can offer. I believe that it is unconscionable to make life hard for the decent, hardworking residents of the area. They deserve to live their lives in their neighborhood in peace and safety. My strong recommendation is to prohibit further growth of the Father's Heart at this location. If immediate survival needs are the concern, this could be accomplished with mobile units in non-residential areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. And I assume that was Colin Murray, which was further down on the list, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, okay. So now it is Jessica Murray. Please state your name, city of residence, and your address or email address if you'd like a notice of decision mailed to you.
My name is Jessica Murray. I live at 612 12th Street in Oregon City. My email address is jessicamiddletonmurray@gmail.com. As mentioned, I live at 612 12th Street in the residence directly across the street from the Father's Heart. And we've lived there since 2010 before they moved in 2012. While the current day shelter is not the subject of this application, it should be noted that the use of the building did not go through any review, nor was there ever any notice to the surrounding property owners, residents, or the neighborhood association. While I fully understand that houselessness is a very serious community crisis, I feel that this organization does not actually responsibly operate their day use shelter nor their previous emergency night warming shelters, and therefore should not be granted the right to expand their services with this permit. They do not meet conditions number 2, number 4, or many of the subsets of condition number 5. The presence of the Father's Heart Day Use Shelter has had a significant impact on my daily life and the lives of my family, all of which is detailed in my written statement. Every single night that they have operated an emergency warming shelter over the years, there are people outside talking loudly and yelling in the parking lot of all hours of the night in direct violation of noise ordinances. There has never been any community meetings with the adjacent neighbors to work with us or to hear our concerns since they moved in 2012. The applicant's included good neighbor policy is only one way and has never been agreed to by the surrounding neighbors or the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. They state in their application under the requirement for the community engagement plan that the Father's Heart executive director and program manager are available 24 hours to address any and all concerns or complaints. However, very few neighbors actually have that contact information, and none of the staff members live in Oregon City, and they are not close by to deal with issues. On a number of occasions, they've not answered or responded when called. I had a meeting with 2 of these staff members, the executive director and the program manager. They did hear me, but it was the first time that I had ever even seen their good neighbor policy. And I made it very clear to them then that they needed to give this policy to all of the adjacent and surrounding neighbors, as well as their contact information with a clear process for submitting concerns and reporting incidents. They did not do that. None of my neighbors that I have talked to have ever heard or seen of their good neighbor policy or any community engagement plan. Their exclusion policy that they have only works for their clients and when they are open. The issues with the unhoused population that are served by the Father's Heart and drawn into the neighborhood by their presence arise not only when they're officially open, but even more significantly when they're not. Frequently, people have banged on our door both day and night, demanding to know why the shelter is not open, asking for food or seeking drugs. I interviewed a former volunteer for the Father's Heart, and she said, "The night shelter takes anyone," and volunteers were warned that the night shelter was more of a danger with more frequent police calls. There are known sex offenders who frequent the Father's Heart at the shelters, and they turn a blind eye to criminality. She said, "The Father's Heart is bringing these people to a location that is directly across the street from families with small children. Those children are my children. I fully believe that all people deserve help and service, and I understand how serious inclement weather is. But the proposed shelter should not be provided or should be provided in a different location that does not substantially limit, impair, or preclude the use of the surrounding properties, allowing us to protect and maintain our neighborhood. The conditions are not met." Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Murray. Kristen Murray, please state your name, city of residence. If you'd like a notice of the decision, state your physical address or your email address, and make sure you're not muted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Kristen Murray and I am 12. I will be entering 7th grade at Tom Watson, formerly Ogden Middle School. I'm asking the planning commission to deny the conditional use permit for the night shelter. They do not meet criteria for altering the character of the surrounding neighborhood. We moved into our house at 612 12th Street in Oregon City when I was 1 year old before the Father's Heart was there. I have grown up with this place directly across the street. The front of our house faces their entrance and parking lot. I've had many interactions with the homeless people who go to Father's Heart, and most of them were not good. One winter when it snowed a lot and they had the night shelter open, I was playing in the snow in my front yard with a friend. A woman came out of the shelter, walked across the street, and tried to get me and my friend to leave with her. We said no and ran inside and told my mom. I used to walk home from bus stop at Jackson campus for Springwater School. I once had a homeless man who tried grabbing me on 12th Street on my way home.
Go ahead, keep reading.
and I ran home. I used to play almost every day with the neighbors around the corner, and every single time we walked to each other's houses, we had to have a parent or their older brother walk us about 90 feet because it wasn't safe to just run one house around the corner. I was never allowed to play in our front yard. I didn't ever feel safe. I now have a 5-year-old brother, and he can't play outside out in front either, unless my parents are right there. I've seen many incidents with the violent and yelling people where the police were called in front of our house.
Thank you very much, Tristan.
Say what you want to say.
I have a little bit more.
Okay, I'm sorry.
When they had the overnight shelter, there were people talking and yelling and smoking in the parking lot all night long. My brother and I have been woken up because of the activities across the street. My parents' cars have been broken into, and my mom once found someone sleeping in her car. There are a lot of scary people across the street. Sometimes they sleep on the property when they are closed or are hiding behind trash cans. I have been yelled at by people from across the street at night many times. I know houselessness is a serious issue. I hope the city can find a better solution than a night shelter at this location. I feel that Father's Heart should have some responsibility for the people they bring into the neighborhood, whether they are officially open or not. Their operations have limited and impaired my experience living here and not being able to just be a kid. Please choose to deny the permit of all the kids who live close to the shelter. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you. Okay. Ms. Michelle Schaefer, please state your name, city of residence. If you'd like a notice of the decision, state your physical address or your email address, and make sure you're not muted.
I'm not seeing a Michelle Schaefer logged into the Zoom.
I looked up and down. I cannot find her either. Okay. If she shows up before we're done with the public comments, she can have her turn. Miss Amanda Allwine, please state your name, city of residence. If you'd like a notice of decision, state your physical address or your email address and make sure you're not muted. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Amanda Allwine. I live at 1102 Jefferson, 2 blocks away from the Father's Heart. I'll be using my time to read comments made by Oregon City community members who reside in the McLaughlin neighborhood, which is where the Father's Heart is located. These comments were submitted along with an unofficial petition opposing this permit. At the time I wrote this statement, over 70 Oregon City residents had signed the petition, the majority of whom live within a mile of the Father's Heart. I could spend my 3 minutes telling you my own stories about homeless people in crisis here in this neighborhood, each more heartbreaking than the last, but that would take way more than 3 minutes. In a nutshell, I've seen fighting, domestic violence, petty theft, menacing, public indecency, public defecation, open drug use, glass pipes and needles specifically, camping, dumping trash, and fires. I've seen people in the midst of medical and mental crisis and been unable to help aside from calling the police, which is not my first choice and generally not going to make things any better. What I do want to say before I read my neighbor's comments is that I appreciate the volunteers at the Father's Heart. They genuinely care for people and want to help. The problem is that the people they're trying to help need far more than a change of clothes and something to eat. These are people who need medical, mental health, and addiction services. Until this city has a comprehensive plan to deal with homelessness in a proactive way, I cannot support any further services being offered at the Father's Heart. And to be honest, I don't think it belongs here at all. This is a residential neighborhood adjacent to a downtown that is trying hard to revitalize. Please listen to the comments of my friends and neighbors here in the McLaughlin neighborhood. This illustrates how the current operations have affected neighborhood livability, and adding services will only further the impact. This statement is from Adam Tygeson, who lives 2 blocks away. We've had multiple negative issues with people experiencing homelessness with our home and our neighbors' homes as well. Father's Heart does good things, but it definitely should not be expanding. And frankly, it should be looking to relocate out of this residential neighborhood. Fong Ha, who lives 1 block away. I believe that overnight shelters should be located near medical providers, social services, and other resources that will help houseless and homeless individuals in a better supported manner, none of which are near the Father's Heart facility. Additionally, the Father's Heart talks about their good neighbor policy. My concern is that the policy does not cover anyone leaving the facility before and after. Numerous cases in which we, the neighbors living in the neighborhood, have had to witness the same people leaving the facility sleep, urinate, rummage through private property, steal, and other disorderly conduct that would otherwise not be so if the facility was properly located near desired location that had the resources and utilities needed. Denise Beasley, who lives near the elevator. A homeless shelter is a wonderful idea. Unfortunately, the location of Father's Heart is contributing to crime and other disruptions in the surrounding neighborhood. Please encourage a change in the location that is not near homes. Cameron Purcell, who lives 1 block away. Our daughter is afraid to go out in the front yard without a parent because she was approached and verbally accosted by a homeless person. She's had to climb and jump over our fence to get away. We have also had, upon returning home from work, homeless people lingering on our front porch and yard. Gregory Lefevre, who lives 4 blocks away. The Father's Heart, while well-intentioned, is an inadequate solution to solving local homelessness, while presenting a potentially significant negative impact on the McLaughlin neighborhood. This negative impact is due to roaming transients, some of whom are drug users and some of whom are mentally and behaviorally challenged. The presence of users of the Father's Heart intentionally or unintentionally attracts other homeless and disadvantaged persons, all of whom would be better served by a larger facility offering more and better services for them. Please deny this conditional use permit. And there are about 7 others that I'll save for the August 9th meeting.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, you're out of time, but we appreciate all your comments. Okay. Where are we? Ms. Heidi McKay? Please state your name, city of residence. If you'd like a notice of decision, state your physical address or email address, and make sure you're not muted.
Hi there, my name is Heidi McKay. I live right around the corner from the homeless shelter at 709 11th Street. I do not need an email. I'll follow this on my own. Thank you very much. So I worked on the Parkway Revitalization Project at Latourette Park, DC Latourette Park, for over 6 years. And I also was the one that started the first painted intersection at 11th and Jefferson, also the first lending library. Those were all things that I did in response to what was happening because of the day use shelter. I was trying to establish community in my neighborhood and offset the increase in crime that started to happen after I moved into the neighborhood. Felt very unsafe about my child being outside, and I was trying to establish our neighborhood as a place where people gather and where people come together in a safe neighborhood. Now, as I continued to work on this project over many years, the homeless continued to destroy many of the things, break off the lending library door. Again, lots of people, our packages, like none of our neighbors really feel safe leaving their Amazon packages or any packages on their doorsteps. I'm considered a package stealer because I steal everyone's packages and then text them and say, hey, I've got them, because nobody feels safe about their packages on their porches. Also, something I'd like to reiterate that's already been said before is that Father's Heart has no mental health or paraprofessional mental health professionals. They don't have any quantifiable information stating how many people make it to transitional housing, temporary housing, permanent housing. There is nobody at this facility that is actually actively helping or engaging with these folks. And then, like Mary said, when the shelter closes at 7 a.m. pertaining to the actual overnight portion, at 7 a.m., that's when both of my children leave to wait for the bus stop. So that's when you get homeless people who are mentally ill and registered sex offenders literally on the same block as children waiting for the bus. I just don't think that that's a very safe clash of 2 different demographics, and I just don't think it's a good location. I think that the city needs to address the homelessness emergency issue that's becoming systemic And also it's having such a negative impact on what's happening on Washington Street with Corner 14 and the OCB, and all of these places are just actively trying to revitalize our downtown. And this Father's Heart is like actively doing its very best to deteriorate all of our best efforts. So I appreciate your time, and I would encourage you to look at this as a city issue and not putting the burden on one particular church with no mental health professionals to address the homelessness problem in our city.
Thank you. Okay, I still don't see Miss Michelle Schaefer in our participant list. So I'm guessing she's not here. Has anybody else asked to speak?
We did receive 2 more comment forms
Okay.
a little bit earlier this evening. We have Tyler McKay as well as Dan Cromer.
Okay, Tyler McKay, and then Dan, I'm going to spell it how it sounds, Cromer. Okay, Tyler McKay, let's start with you. Please state your name. I'm not muted, am I? Okay, state your name, city of residence. If you'd like a notice of decision sent to you, your address or your email address, and make sure you're not muted.
Great, Tyler McKay, Oregon City resident, 709 11th Street. And so I guess a few points that I just want to make. First off, my name's Tyler McKay again, but I am a clinical licensed social worker with the state of Oregon. I work in the mental health field, have for several years, and definitely have a focus on a community approach at mental health. And so one of the things that is a little bit frustrating at the starting of this meeting is the continuance, because really that's just a response acknowledging that they really did not know that this many people in the community had a concern, which it just goes to show that they were not abiding by their own due diligence to have that ongoing communication. We all knew it, and they should have as well. So one of the other points that I want to make is that they had said that there are no physical alterations to the building, and that's great. I can appreciate that. That's a whole different process. Also, there is a maximum capacity, or not a maximum capacity, but they said they serve 2,100 over 43 nights. That equates to about 49 people a night. And I don't know, I mean, I have actually been inside that building. It does look bigger than it is on the outside because there's different levels. But I don't know that the fire department, the fire marshal, I have no idea what the occupancy rating is for that, but definitely for housing, sheltering homeless people, those that are in need in the dead of winter with sleeping bags and gear that they go and push around from 7 a.m. in the morning until 7 p.m. at night, that's going to fill that building pretty quickly. So what they really need is to be located in an area where they can actually obtain adult services. Like somebody had pointed out earlier, this is a addiction problem mostly, right? Like there's all kinds of different people that can end up accessing services through this facility, and no doubt they do need to eat. But there's a million different ways to have a response to that, right? Grocery outlet, you can go and donate money and they'll do little gift baskets or whatever to different things. So you could actually have a community-based approach at like meeting people where they are, like where are the homeless people at, and let's take them food, rather than having it right in the middle of a neighborhood. So there are different approaches, and there are, like I said, adult services up at Red Soils campus. By all means, they could access adult services, mental health services, drug and alcohol services, as well as a grocery store. We do not have a grocery store down here. So we're asking these people that are experiencing houselessness to go and do all of their shopping at 7-Eleven. They're definitely not going to downtown Main Street and like hitting it up at Nebbiolo, right? That's just not a thing that they're accessing. So in terms of like services they have, it is not in this downtown area. And my last little point that I'll make is it is the city's responsibility to balance a lot. And we recognize that. We recognize that you are trying to balance houselessness, of those that are most vulnerable in need, and also revitalize a city that is an attraction that helps thrive and grow a city. And so I'm just encouraging that those services be in a designated area where services currently already are, and allow for your different areas, your historical neighborhood, to remain its historical neighborhood, and allow for the houselessness and those that are mentally ill to get the services they need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam. And I apologize for calling you Tyler. All right, Mr. Dan Cromer, and please state your name, city of residence. If you'd like a notice of decision sent to you, state your physical address or your email address, and make sure you're not muted. Thank you.
And correction real quick, Eric, that was
Yes,
Tyler.
sir.
That was Tyler that was speaking.
You said his name was Adam.
No, I said my name's Tyler McKay. That just spoke.
Boy, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm gonna end it right there. Mr. Dan Cromer. What happened to Dan? Mr. Cromer, you're muted.
I know Dan Cromer is a Parkinson's patient, and he expressed to me that he may not feel well enough to speak at the meeting. He signed up in case he was, but I would guess that at this point, he doesn't feel like he can speak and would probably like to speak at the next meeting. He and his wife both have submitted written comments.
Dan Cromer cannot testify because of his computer. Dan, do you want to use pens?
Yeah, use.
Here, we're switching computers so Dan can talk.
Thank you. Apologies for stepping in.
Are you going to testify?
Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay, Dan
Yes, sir.
Cromer, 1112 John Adams Street, Oregon City. I've been a neighbor of this resident of this neighborhood since the last 29 years. I'm going to defer my comments until the
August 9th.
was referred to on August 9th. We would like to see with the staff report after we get a chance to review all the comments that come in. So I'll defer my time, my 3 minutes until then. Would that be, is that okay?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cromer. All right, is that it? Do we have anyone else?
That was all the
Someone-
testimony forms we received, but I'm not sure if there are others that haven't had the chance to fill out the form.
Okay, I see no hands up.
No, excuse me. This is Terry Popino. I sent in a form and apparently it wasn't received. I live at 720 11th Street. Terry, last name is Popino. Those are P's like Paul, Poppino. I would like to defer my comments until August 9th.
Okay, thank you, Terry. Terry Popino.
There's another one.
This is
Okay.
Pam Cromer. And I live at 1112 John Adams Street for the past 29 years. And I would also like to defer my testimony until August 9th. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm hanging on just a little bit, just to make sure we don't miss anyone. Okay, I feel we may have gotten them all. I definitely want everybody to be able to speak their piece. And So gonna
I'm
give-
sorry, I did receive a private message just now from Wendy Marshall. It sounds like she's having some technical difficulties, but she has a written memo and is available if staff or planning commission has questions. I'm not sure if she's representing the neighborhood association or is just here representing herself.
Okay, do you know if she wants us to respond to it tonight or something we should review and respond to at the next meeting?
Hi, this is Wendy Marshall. Hi, Diliana. Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I am not speaking personally. I live on the other side of town. I was speaking, or I wrote the memo for the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. And at this time, I don't have anything to add, but maybe there will be in August. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. At this point, I'm a bit afraid to continue because I feel like someone else is going to want to speak. So I'm going to give it about 30 seconds just in case. Okay, at this time, we're going to give 5 minutes to the applicant. If he chooses to address, if you would like to address any of the comments that they've heard tonight, they don't have to, but it's something they can do, or they can wait until the next meeting if they don't choose to speak at this time.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hello.
Hi, I'm Robin Keating from the Father's Heart, and I just wanted to make sure that everyone here tonight understands that we are listening to what's being said. We hear your concerns, and we'll be preparing a response on how to best work with our community. We care about all community members, and we just want to make sure that's clear tonight. We do hear you, and we do thank you for your responses. This is a good discussion that we're starting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, I don't think we have any more comments. So at this point, I'm going to close the public hearing, not the public record. Record stays open. And I'd like to know if any member of the Planning Commission would like to request any additional information from staff that they would like the staff to return with for the next meeting. Staff's already going to be sending out a revised notice of the application for another meeting on August 9th and revising the staff report based on the newly submitted information as well as the comments heard this evening. So with that said, I see Commissioner West's hand up. We'll start with you.
Thank you. What is the process, or how do you establish the criteria for how many people can sleep within the building on a cold night? I saw the fire department, Clackamas Fire, had a few metrics in there, but what is the bottom line on how you determine how many guests you have?
This is Marty, Father's Heart. The fire department has been to our facility, and basically they measure how much room we have, and we put them in mats. So from the very get-go, we've been assigned 49 people based on size. So that's the only criteria that I can base it on. What they base it on, I don't have that, but it's measured very clearly and concisely. And then when COVID came, they came back and had different criteria. So we were only allowed 13.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stoll, was your hand up?
It was not.
Okay, for some reason, your screen popped up and you're on the floor. Okay, sorry about that. I see no hands. Okay. All right,
Actually,
so yes.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to make a quick comment. One of the testimony indicated that the continuance was because the applicant didn't have their application together or something to that effect. I just wanted, I believe it was Tyler McKay. The continuance is the request of staff to renotice because it was improperly noticed the first time. It's not, has nothing to do with the applicant.
That is correct. That is what we were told at the beginning of the meeting. That they need to I think Laura could explain that a little better, what the procedure that the city needs to go through now to change from a type 3 to a type 4 notice. If you could help us out.
Yes, the notice improperly identified the application as a type 3, which is what every other type of conditional use is. This is a type 4. In our code, we identified conditional uses as a type 4 process, which means that Planning Commission will offer a recommendation to the City Commission and it will go to the City Commission after this. So I stated the type wrong and need to correct that.
Okay, all right. So we're going to be giving our opinion to the City Commission, but ultimately the decision is going to be made by the City Commission, not by us. So we're going to be acting as an advisory committee, an advisory commission. So what exactly should our motion then include?
Staff is recommending a continuance of Indilionic and Filmion on the agenda item to August 9th.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I move that we continue GLUA 21-00019, CU 21-00002 to the Planning Commission meeting August 9th, 2021.
Second. Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Stoll and a second by Commissioner Mitchell. Call roll, please.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Stoll?
Aye.
Commissioner Gage?
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Aye.
Commissioner Staggs?
Aye.
Chair Schlagenhofer?
Aye.
All right, motion approved. Just to reiterate, on the next hearing, which is in August, it will be an in-person hearing with an opportunity for testimony electronically, should anyone request that, and it will be at the new chambers, which is up at the public safety facility. All of that information will be identified in the notice as well, and the public will get another 3 minutes and an unlimited amount of public testimony until that time. Thank you.
Thank you. That is excellent news. I know a lot of people have been waiting for this day. It's been a long time. We miss the chambers. We miss being able to see people. So that's awesome. I'm glad that the city worked hard to get that going. Okay, let's move on. Quit talking about that. Moving on to.
Does the Planning Commission want to do a 5-minute break between items?
Perfect.
Since it's 8:30 or?
Sure.
Good idea.
Yes, please.
And Laura Turway, could you enable my screen share while we're waiting? Thank you.
Done. Okay, so can we, it looks like it's 8:30. Can we meet back here at 8:35?
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So far, the only people who have turned in public comments for this is the applicant, though I did provide a meeting link to Paul Edgar, who turned in email testimony right before the meeting started. I have not seen him yet, but right when public hearing starts, we may make a vocal call to see if anybody else wishes to speak.
Okay, I was just wondering because if anybody new has joined us since I read the script, I need to read it again.
That I don't know. I think there have been people that have that are related to the applicant But I will defer to Ms. Richter about that.
Okay. Is she with us?
Yes, I am here.
Okay. Well, what's the verdict?
And I do believe that a number of people have joined the meeting since you read the disclosures. So I think the safest course would be to read them again. Sorry.
That's fine. I want to make sure everybody hears it. Okay. It's been more than 5 minutes, but I want to make sure everybody is back. I don't see Commissioner Staggs yet. And let's see if we're missing anyone else.
I'm here.
I'll leave it up to Ms. Turway when we start.
Sounds like all their commission is back and you're ready to begin.
Okay, so we are moving on to agenda item number 2. The North End, I guess I should mention that at the public testimony portion, Ms. Turway will be holding up the 30-second remaining sign when you have 30 seconds remaining. So if you see that pop up, you got 30 seconds to go, so we don't have to rudely interrupt you, which we don't want to do. So 30 seconds gives you time to state your most important statements. Okay, agenda item number 2, the North End Master Plan for the former Rossman landfill, GLUA 21-000016, MAS 21-02, CU 21-01, FP 21-03, and GEO 21-030. It is a quasi-judicial hearing, so we will start with the quasi-judicial hearing script. 2 public hearings on land use applications are scheduled tonight. This is the second. Our role is to conduct a public hearing and to make decisions about the matter before us. In making those decisions, we must apply the applicable codes and laws and cannot vary from or change those laws or codes. Members of the Planning Commission are to be unbiased. Before the start of the hearing, I will ask the Planning Commissioners whether they have any potential conflicts, such as family, financial, or business relationships with any of the applicants or with regard to the land in question. I will also ask whether any of the Planning Commissioners have discussed the application in question with any of the parties or have independent knowledge of relevant facts, such as from a visit to the site in question. Any member of the audience may question any Planning Commissioner about their disclosures. The staff report has been prepared for each application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the Planning Commission will follow is set out in state law and Oregon City Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps are shown on the Planning Commission website. Public testimony will be called on in order it was requested in advance of the meeting. If you have not emailed city staff at planning@orcity.org to request to speak and would like to testify, please raise your virtual or physical hand when I ask if there are others in the audience who would like to participate. For the public record, begin all testimony stating your name and city of residence. If you would like to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please state your mailing address or email address. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. Any person may submit written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to city staff while the record is open. If they are not given to staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the hearing is closed. If the Planning Commission makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised on the record for the consideration of the City Commission of Luba or both. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient detail and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond to, the issue will not be deemed appealable to the City Commission or State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient detail to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Now we'll open the record for Oregon City file number, I hate to say it again, but file number GLUA-210016 with MAS 21-02, CU 21-01, FP 21-03, and GEO 21-030. The request for the North End Master Plan for the former Rossman landfill. We will now ask each planning commissioner if they have any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, bias, or any other statement to declare, or have visited the site. If there was a site visit, the planning commissioner must declare what he or she perceived. Okay. No particular order. Commissioner Staggs.
I have none of those, and I have not visited the site recently.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Stoll.
No conflicts of interest, no ex parte contact. I did make a visit to the site. I accessed the driveway off of Abernathy, parked at the where there's a chain across the road, and then walked to the end of the road. The only thing I saw was a giant fire hazard. The whole place really was bone dry and ready to go up at a moment's notice. That's what I saw.
Okay, sounds like they need a sprinkler. Thank you. Commissioner Gage.
No ex parte contact, no conflicts of interest, no bias. I've driven by the site again and I've been at the site at the driving range many times in the past as well.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Mitchell.
No ex parte contacts, no conflict of interest, no bias, and I've driven by the site countless times. I did not make a specific site visit for tonight.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner West?
No ex parte contacts, no conflict of interest, no bias, and I have not driven by it other than on the way to and from the freeway. So I have not visited the site.
Okay, thank you. And this is for myself. I've had no ex parte contact, no conflicts of interest, no bias. I have not visited the site since last time besides driving by it when I go to Home Depot, but I did not go there for the intention of visiting the site. Okay. Would any member of the audience care to question any of the commissioners on their statements? Okay, I don't hear any. We will now commence with the planning staff report. And is this Mrs. Robinson Gardner?
Yes, this is Chair Schlagenhofer and planning commissioners. This is a continuation of a land use file from the June 28th Planning Commission meeting. I'm going to provide a general overview of the application, what has been revised, and the additional items to be added into the record this evening. I'm available for questions. We also have John Replinger, our transportation engineer, is available this evening if you have any questions to answer as well. So we have a fair amount of items to be entered into the record this evening. They've all been forwarded to you either previously or today at the Planning Commission. The applicant has broken up some of the to-do items into separate memos that kind of discreetly address the issues. So there is a 1744 geologic hazards memo, a 1754 wall height memo with proposed revised conditions of approval, a July 9th, 2021 memo from Christine White related to the geologic hazard code, the final supplemental transportation analysis memo by Kittleson Associates with Phil Worth, and a street design modification request findings, and that's the street width of the central road connecting Abernathy and Washington Street, and some requested revisions to the street width conditions of approval. Staff has added an email from Tim Pfeiffer's, our geohazard consultant, providing his comments to the kind of back and forth conversations related to the geohazard revised condition of approval, as well as this evening you were sent an overview staff memo with the proposed revised conditions of approval that we've been working on since we last were at the meeting on June 28th. There is one condition of approval that unfortunately was copied incorrectly. It was not the final version. I have the final version in our presentation this evening. And so if there is any motion to approve, I'll work with you to make sure that's also including the correct revised condition as presented in the staff report. There has been additional public comment. Jerry Herman provided testimony. His testimony relates to policy related to natural resource and a request to not have the natural resources removed by this application. I think there was a little miscommunication related to what the previous type 1 natural resource overlay district exemptions, which were referenced and attached in the staff report, which removed the pavement portions of Abernathy and Washington Streets from the Natural Resource Overlay District, which is allowed as an outright type 1 exemption. And so that's been done. Any Natural Resource Overlay District on the property that hasn't been exempted, either a soil cap or the pavement of the roads, will go through review at any resources affected by any street improvement. Mr. Edgar provided 2 emails. I have forwarded that on related to a request for continuance this evening, as well as comments related to related to comprehensive plan policies and other items that he does not believe that the applicant has met the findings for. Mr. Boyce provided testimony email related to stormwater and natural resources related to the Cove. And that has been forwarded by the applicant. I'm going to hand this over to Ms. Richter to provide some additional direction to some of the public comment received at the last minute this evening, to give you a little direction of how to view that as we move forward for the rest of my presentation. Ms. Richter?
Thank you. Quickly, let me check and make sure I'm not muted. Okay. Quickly, I don't know if you all have had a chance to review the materials from Mr. Edgar and Mr. Boyce, but as Christina said, Mr. Edgar has raised concerns about the applicant's failure to address the ancillary documents to the comprehensive plan. He's identified the end of the Oregon Trail Master Plan, the Trails Master Plan, and the Stormwater Master Plans as documents that he believes the applicant hasn't addressed. My understanding is that the Trails Master Plan is addressed by the provision of a trail through this development. The end of the Oregon Trail Master Plan does not apply to this application. The city went through the sort of convoluted history of the Oregon end of the Oregon Trail Master Plan through some litigation a couple of years ago, and determined that that plan was never adopted by the City Commission. So it is not actually an ancillary document to the comprehensive plan. And then Mr. Boyce's testimony, Mr. Edgar's testimony related to stormwater. All of the stormwater standards and guidelines that the city has adopted by code will be reviewed and evaluated as part of the DDP, Detailed Development Plan review. A number of the comprehensive plan policies that Mr. Boyce talks about relate to obligations that the city is encouraged to pursue as part of its planning activities. For example, how it evaluates water quality or maintains water quality, and the standards it uses to evaluate that. Those are not applicable to this application. So We can make findings to that effect. Should you all decide to proceed with a tentative decision tonight, or we can continue and take more testimony. But these are all things that I think that the applicant can also respond to tonight, but also we can make findings explaining after you make a tentative decision why these plan policies don't apply. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have with respect to any of that, but I know it's a lot of information at the 11th hour. So that's what I can offer right now.
Okay, I guess I have a quick question then. So we could take some notes on what they're asking us, but nothing that's been brought up warrants a necessary continuance.
Correct. Unless the applicant requests an opportunity to respond with additional evidence, I feel fairly confident that the commission could make a decision tonight, a tentative decision, and we could return with revised findings that would respond specifically to the additional comments we received tonight.
Okay, great. That's good for me. If one of the other commissioners has any more concerns about that, you're welcome to speak now.
Regarding Mr. Edgar's request for continuance, my memory is that it's an automatic continuance, but only for the first continuance. Is that correct?
That is correct. The automatic obligation is for the first continuance only. So
okay.
I'm not seeing a justification right now for an additional continuance unless there's a particular need that the commission identifies.
Great, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Stoll. That was my next talking point. So thank you for taking that away from me. I appreciate it. Okay, so kind of what I see this evening, the Planning Commission can approve really a tentative approval with the revised conditions as provided in the staff report and revised in this presentation, the specific condition approval I identified. And if the applicant wishes to, we can return with a final findings for adoption at the next meeting if that's something the applicant wishes to do. Other option is continuation of the application to a date certain, but this is with another 120-day waiver request from the applicant to ensure we have enough time in our state mandated land use decision process. But this, of course, really is a request from the applicant to continue. And then 3, deny the application. But at this point, the Planning Commission needs to provide staff any additional direction on which standards are not being met. So to provide a little overview again of the purpose of a master plan is a type 3 planning commission process that allows an applicant a path of clarity and additional certainty in a multi-phase development proposal. So this application is property zone mixed use downtown, and except for the conditional uses, the applicant could come in with serial site plan and design reviews on an administrative level if they wanted to. However, they've chosen to provide more clarity for them as they move forward for a multi-phase implementation and are requesting a master plan approval. So this provides clear and objective staff level conditions of approval. So with a successful master plan is a really clear roadmap for staff level review of each DDP. This vests the 2021 code for the life of the master plan. Once again, don't change the goalpost for an applicant. They provide that certainty. And this is an option for an applicant. It's not required for the development. Master plans refuse the full build out impact and provides phase conditions. And what the applicant is doing this evening, the master plan can request site specific adjustments to development code, but they need to show that on balance, the resulting project meets the intent of the city code and comprehensive plan policies. And so that's and they also have a nexus and proportional mitigation for any impacts created by those requested adjustments. So have they shown that on balance, the project meets the goals of the city code and comprehensive plan policies, and have they mitigated any identified impacts for the specific adjustments being asked for? So this application, to remind everybody, is a master plan with 4 requested adjustments, which is for allow additional block width size in certain areas of the development, allow higher retaining walls in certain areas of the development related to Chapter 1754, which is a little bit more of like an aesthetic part of our development code. And I'll talk a little bit about as we get to our revised conditions of approval. Adjustment to the siting of structures. So in some areas, they're not going to be able to meet 60% of the site frontage, but in many areas they are. And allowed elevated external stairways or walkways, specifically in the areas related to the parking garage and multifamily mixed-use development that abuts Washington Street. There has been an initial feasibility review for phased infrastructure and transportation implementation conditions, and we'll talk a little bit more about these revised conditions that provide a little additional certainty of vesting in initial phases for transportation. There is a conditional use application as part of this package, which looks at approval for tenants, larger tenant size for retail tenants in 3 buildings and specific conditions of approval that relate to that, and conditional use drive-through locations, N1, E1, C1, S1, and E5. And there's specific conditional use drive-through locations for that. Conditions. There's a general overview for feasibility for the flood management overlay district and the geologic hazard overlay district. Each DDP application that has a flood management overlay district or geologic hazards overlay district component to it will be reviewed for full compliance at the time of DDP. These are general overview conditions of approval. So there were some outstanding items from the June 28th meeting, and this is going to be the bulk of my presentation. We left the meeting letting the Planning Commission applicant know that we're still working on revisions to the transportation condition of approvals. The applicant has worked with staff and John Repplinger, our transportation consultant, to provide the additional data needed to vest a certain amount of trips, and that's kind of allow up to 40% of the trips in a revised condition that I'll review. And wall height limitations in the geohazard overlay district. While 1754 you are allowed adjustments to 1754 through the master plan process. The master plan process can't actually adjust standards in an overlay district. And so there was continual conversation about how larger walls that were agreed by both parties, both the applicants, geotechnical engineers, and the city and city staff to be considered safe, but maybe above the preferred height limitations for terraced slopes, how that could still be potentially approved in a geologic hazard overlay district. And I will go through the proposed condition of approval that addresses that issue. In the June 28th meeting, there was a request to work with the staff and the applicant to provide some additional ranges and sideboards of what actually this master plan amendment is approving. So this is the applicant has a range of uses and a range of sizes. And as long as they stay within those ranges, they can stay at the detailed development plan. But if they move outside of those ranges, then they will move to be a master plan amendment. So we provide a little more clarity on what exactly the master plan is amending, kind of those side border ranges. Just to remind everybody, the site, a lot of these conditions talk about districts. So this is a slide that shows the district areas, as well as a slide that shows the proposed open spaces, which is a majority of the mitigation conditions of approval that are requested as part of the 4 adjustments to the master plan. The applicant really is looking at an urban design mitigation to provide additional open spaces and landscaping that are above and beyond what was required if the applicant came in for serial site plan design reviews. I'd like to go over the revised conditions of approval. These conditions were sent to you in a revised staff memo. Applicant and the city staff and city staff's consultants have been working over the last week on revisions to these specific conditions of approval that we think provide the additional clarity needed and provide the additional findings needed to show compliance with our code and our comprehensive plan policies. So specifically wall height 1754, there was an initial working plan to have an exhibit. So the initial staff report, you'll see it says in areas identified in Exhibit X. And as we actually got into the process of creating an exhibit, it was a little bit of a Pandora's box to be exactly what the plan would show. And so there was a bit of a pivot to move towards a narrative condition of approval related to the wall heights. Once again, this is more the aesthetic issue of the wall heights. The structural component of the wall heights will be addressed in the geologic hazard condition of approval. But for this, it really segments it into two categories. One for retaining walls that exceed the height limit by less than 5 feet. Mitigation shall be provided through a combination of vegetated walls and plantings. And then for areas that are taller than 5 feet, it's really looking at a condition that mitigates and covers 40% of the exposed wall area through a combination of vegetated walls, plantings, public art murals, or other mitigation measures as approved by the community development director. And so what this does is it ensures that there's not long expanses of walls greater than 5 feet above the limit. And so this shows that proportional mitigation of 40%. So staff was comfortable with this narrative approach rather than an exhibit. The second piece of the wall height relates to the geohazard. And now if you notice on the top right-hand side, the geologic hazard area really relates to the steep slopes on the edges of the property. And that's really the a lot of it is the steep slopes of the landfill and the fill, though to the right, near the natural resource behind the Home Depot and at the edge of the fill cap, some of that steep slope is related to the natural resource overlay district, which will not be constructed. Any of the development will be on. So the applicant has been working with staff to identify if there is a way to allow larger and taller walls within the geologic hazard code, because we have specific height sections cited that requires terracing. And so staff found that really the only way to provide relief for this is for the applicant to apply for a planning commission variance to the wall height standard in the geologic hazard. The applicant is choosing this condition and they plan on coming back to the Planning Commission at a later time to look either at a site-wide approach to retaining walls and what is required to show compliance with the geologic hazard code for a taller wall. And the Planning Commission will review that condition, that variance request. And so the geologic hazard code revised condition, which is incorrect in the staff memo I sent this afternoon, but is correct in the presentation you see in front of you. And if approved this evening, please reflect that it includes this version of the condition. I'm going to read it out. OCMC 17.44060D requires that where cut or fill activity within a slope exceeds 7 feet in vertical height, it must be terraced to a maximum vertical height of 5 feet and a minimum vegetated width of 3 feet between. Total cut and fill slope shall not exceed a vertical height of 15 feet. The applicant has submitted a plan indicating cut and fill activity on existing slopes to be secured through retaining walls that exceed this standard in certain areas. Staff has found that this approach may be approvable under OCMC 17.44060D from a technical perspective, but the proposed wall will replace the slope and eliminate the potential hazard associated with the steep slope. Several wall types are technically feasible, but a wall system has yet to be selected. Thus, the applicant shall seek a variance either independently for the entire site or as part of each discrete development phase within the DDP review for the selected wall systems. So that's basically providing a general overview that it's reasonable, their approach, but they really need to provide additional detail and have it be reviewed through a type 3 Planning Commission variance process. And the applicant has agreed to this condition and is moving forward and planning and can provide additional background in their presentation about this. The next conditions of approval that are proposed to be revised relate to the street width of the connector street that runs the north-south road, which runs between Abernathy and Washington Street. And there's been some discussion about does there need to be a center turn lane through the whole section, and what the exact components of the street shall be, along with the specific design of the shared use path. And so with additional direction from both Phil Worth with Kittleson and John Replinger, our transportation consultant, there was found that there was not sufficient trip generation to require a center turn lane. And so with that, there's with some revisions to that center street network. And the conditions you see here provide additional detail that allowed for a 10-foot shared use path running on the west side of the center line of the north-south road. And that all vehicular travel lanes should be either 11 or 12 feet. And finally, there's a new condition of approval added that really specifies the street width related to this center turn, this center north-south connector road that incorporates both the shared use path, the removal of the center turn lane, all within the 80-foot right-of-way. The last condition of approval relates to transportation, and I have not provided all of the conditions of approval that have been identified by Mr. Replinger, but I do have his memo available, as well as the staff's red line conditions memo I can bring up. The specificity I think that is important is previously staff had provided conditions of approval where the transportation sufficiency and performance standards were addressed at each individual DDP. So every time you came in, you kind of did your transportation plan to show that you met the standard. And the moment you didn't meet the standard, you couldn't move forward with your phase, knowing that there were two major intersections we have in the red and blue stars that will need to be improved before full build out, both the Jug Handle phase 2 and improvements to the Redland Road Abernathy intersection. We did find that Dunes Drive with additional data and research is acceptable, so that condition was removed previously. Working with Kittleson and John Replinger, our transportation consultant, he was able to come up with a revised conditions of approval that allowed for the vesting of 40% of the trips before the end of 2022, and provides pretty stark detail about what the applicant needs to do at each development approval and what they need to provide to ensure those trip vesting. And Mr. Replinger is available this evening if you have any questions after this presentation. I'm going to move on to the last item. There are two conditions of approval that will be removed because they've now been resolved. The applicant has provided staff a revised D Street, which was the street that was kind of between Abernathy Road and the buildings. Proposed the kind of front of the Abernathy Road. D Street was revised to be more of the local street as proposed in the plan, and that is attached in your agenda. And so that condition can be removed. And there was a previous condition that looked at maybe a consolidated master plan figure. And once again, I think that became a little bit of a Pandora's box. And so I think staff is feels confident that we have the direction we need in a narrative sense through the conditions of approval. So staff is recommending removal of condition approval number 80. And once again, these are the options you have this evening, which is approve the application with the revised conditions as provided in the staff report and the presentation, continuation of the application to a date certain. This most likely will be provided a request from the applicant, and deny the application. I'm going to move back to the transportation slide. If Mr. Replinger wants to provide a brief overview of how we got to the revised conditions of approval that are in the staff memo sent to you this afternoon and are in his revised transportation impact memo. Mr. Replinger?
Thank you, Christina. Yes, the applicant has undertaken considerable additional work in the last 2 weeks. the key to it was in reanalyzing the performance of the key intersections. As Christina mentioned, the Oregon 99 Dunes Drive was found to be acceptable, so that dropped out of the list. But we have 2 different intersections, and given that they are within the regional center, there are special standards that apply to those that involving both the peak hour and the second highest hour for both the AM period and the PM period, as well as the Saturday. But in working with the applicant and the applicant's engineers, we determined that there is an opportunity between now and the end of 2022 for the applicant to construct uses on the site of up to 40% of the total trips without undertaking any improvements, without undertaking any mitigation measures. Beyond that, they will have to undertake specific measures on their own, or they will have to wait for projects such as the Jug Handle Phase 2, which would allow them to move forward with the rest of the development phase. As Christina said, there are some very specific requirements for the applicant to go through to demonstrate that they are either implementing the projects or that a supplemental analysis is showing that conditions are not as originally analyzed in this TIA and the supplemental materials.
Thank you, John. So at this time, I'm going to move up to the slide, the very front. Let's see. And I am available for both John and I are available for any question the Planning Commission may have before we move forward to the applicant's presentation.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Robinson Gardner and Mr. John Ripplinger. I did want to, before we go to questions, I wanted to make a quick clarification. When I introduced this application tonight, I was reading a script and I mistakenly stated, we will now open the record. The record was already open. It was a continuation. We were opening the hearing. We were not opening the record. Record was open. I wanted to clarify that. And I don't know if it matters, but I wanted it to be on the record that the record was open. With that, do we have any questions for, and I think it might, since we have Mr. Ripplinger available, maybe we should start with questions about traffic and go through any traffic questions we've got and then go into other questions, if that works with you guys.
Actually, I'll move the slide then.
And my list of commissioners is small and I'm not seeing any hands. I'm not seeing any faces.
Oh, I've got a hand up.
Commissioner Stoll has a hand up.
I've got it.
Okay, I couldn't see it. Thank you.
No worries. What does full build out of those 2 intersections look like? What would the modifications be?
The full build out of the Redland 213 intersection is the Jug Handle Phase 2 project that was specified in the Transportation System Plan. Basically, it provides for additional through lanes in both northbound and southbound directions on 213. And because of the additional lanes, it ends up extending the improvement very far to the south, up the hill, with retaining walls, and it will be a big project. For the Holcomb Abernathy Redland intersection, there's probably not much change to the intersection itself, but some restriping and extending the turn lanes further back to allow additional storage.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Thank you. Mr. Ripplinger, I want to make sure I understand something here. In the TIA, on page 42, there's a chart, and it talks about total trips, internal trips, pass-by trips, diverted trips, and ends up with primary trips.
Yes.
Total trips, I understand. Internal trips, I understand. Those are ones that'll just take place on the site. My understanding, pass-by trip is somebody who's on Abernathy or Washington Street already and just decides to go in, right?
Correct.
Okay. Diverted trip is somebody who's, say, on I-205 or 213 and decides to get off and come to the development, right?
That's correct.
So those trips are now in the intersection on those streets. They're in the Abernathy Redland intersection. They're on Washington Street. Why are those not included in primary trips? Because they're on those streets and they wouldn't have been otherwise.
Well, that's why we specifically account for them as diverted trips. Because that person going home from work on 205 gets off onto 213, moves on to Washington Street, does their business, and returns back to Washington Street, 213, and then get back on 205. So they are accounted for in terms of their traffic impact at 3 or 4 key locations. They're accounted for at the ramps for 213. They're accounted for at Washington and 213. They're accounted for at the entry point. In contrast, the primary trip is one where a person goes from his or her home specifically to this site, they're shopping, and then returning by the same route. But yes, all of the trips are accounted for at the driveways at the site, but some of them have different impacts on different intersections along the way.
But the diverted trips are counted in those nearby intersections, like Abernathy.
Yes, they are.
Okay, thank you. A couple of questions on the ODOT letter. They questioned the annual growth rate assumption, and I have to admit, I saw that before I ever saw the ODOT letter. Annual growth at a fraction of 1% doesn't seem reality.
Well, the difference is, and I think that the applicant's engineer did a good job on this, is they looked at the growth rate on the highways, whereas the ODOT letter references growth in the TSP. The significant difference on this is that in the TSP, development was assumed to occur on this site between now and 2035. So had the applicant used the TSP growth rate and added that on top of the major street network, they in essence would have been double counting the traffic from this site. So
because it was accounted for in the TSP.
Okay.
Right?
I'm sorry, say again, please.
It would be counted double because it was already accounted for in the TSP.
Exactly.
Okay. One more thing, and unfortunately I got paper laying everywhere and I don't find what I was looking for. But there was a list of projects. The Public Works facility was one of them. And I think there were 3 others maybe that were included in the assumptions about the base level of traffic.
That is correct.
Okay. There were 2 that were not on there that I don't understand why they weren't, because they're going to have a huge impact on the intersections on 205 in particular. And that's the Park Place master plan area and the Thimble Creek concept plan area. So why is it that the traffic impacts of those two areas aren't built into the assumptions?
Well, the reason they're not built in is because those are not approved subdivisions yet. They only were approved in terms of the annexation and the rezoning. So this applicant is further along in their process than those from Park Place and elsewhere. So those applicants will have to account for this one as soon as it is approved. So it's the first in the door, first approved it gets included in the next guy's analysis.
Commissioner Mitchell, I just want to add one thing. I think it's the difference between having an assumption in the models for the TSP, which assumed the level of development inside the city's, urban growth boundary, which includes all the 3 concept plans, which is different than a previously approved but not built development, which is actually an approved development application with specific trips that have been approved and need to be integrated into the analysis. So it's kind of the big picture TSP numbers, but looking at the specifics. So John is correct. This application is in, whereas the development application for Thimble Creek or Park Place is not in yet. So just the assumed transportation system plan impact of what was planned for the system.
Okay. I may have some more on the traffic because there's some of the conditions of approval that I want to take a look at, but and so I think a couple of them might relate to traffic, but I'll wait till later.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Mitchell. I am not seeing any other hands. I do have a couple questions for Mr. Ripplinger, but I'm going to wait to see if anybody else has anything to say. And if your hand is up, I can't see it. I can only see virtual hands right now. I see no faces.
Commissioner Staggs has his hand up.
Okay, I can't see that. Thank you.
I just want to make sure I heard earlier correctly that the Redland 213 intersection, for the applicant to go beyond the 40% of development of trips, that intersection and then south of that intersection will require large modifications. Was that correct?
That's partially correct, or maybe let me expand on that. For the Redland 213 intersection, the Jug Handle project, Jug Handle Phase 2, which is listed in the TSP, is a very significant project, and it will provide huge amounts of capacity increase. The applicant could, if that project were to come into place in the next few years, that would solve all of the problems for this applicant and others. Alternatively, the applicant could move forward with, persuade ODOT or some other agency, or could upon itself take on the project that provided an interim improvement. So both are options.
Okay.
But even the interim project would be a significant project, though nowhere near the scale of the Jug Handle Phase 2.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any other hands up? Okay, I have a couple questions. My first one is for John, and actually they're both for John. My question is, how much will this development, if it takes place, how much will it speed up the development of the Jug Handle Phase 2? compared to if this development wasn't happening.
Well, I don't think it will speed up the implementation of it. I think that's to a great extent a political process of trying to get the project moved forward on Oregon's STIP, State Implementation Plan, though this applicant would be on the hook, as are others, for participating in the funding of it. However, their contribution is going to be based upon their proportionate share of the 2035 traffic. So in the overall scheme of things, it will sound like a lot of money, but it's not very much in comparison to the $10 million plus price tag of the jug handle. I think there's going to need to be a concerted effort by the city, the county, and various others to try to move the funding for Jug Handle 2 forward in the STEP and in the metro funding programs.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question is, I did my best to read the data in the traffic report, but I'm not an expert on it, and I think I kind of get the gist of what's going on there. But a question is the burden on the applicant to improve traffic or just to keep it from getting worse? What's their end of the bargain there?
According to the OCMC, the applicant has to show that the transportation system is capable of accommodating the traffic. So as long as the intersections are meeting the adopted performance standards that are principally based on the volume to capacity ratio, and they are meeting the needs of queue storage at the intersections, they can proceed. To the extent that they go over to the extent that they calculate their project along with background will cause the traffic to exceed the volume to capacity standards, they may not move forward without mitigation.
Okay, so any intersection that has acceptable volume to capacity ratios, there could be some intersections that they don't even have to address.
That is correct. Most of the intersections have plenty of capacity. They analyzed 25 existing intersections, and there were only two or three that indicated any performance problems.
Okay, yeah, I remember one of them. I think there was a matter of recalculating the data, and it was actually the way they were measuring it the first time. It was actually more acceptable the second time they read the numbers a different way. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. That was it for me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions for as far as traffic related?
Maybe later, but not right now.
Okay. All right. So let's go into any other questions on any other topic for staff. Mr. Stoll.
Yeah, regarding the wall height, what it says exceeds by more than 5 feet or exceeds by less than 5 feet. What is the wall height standard?
Sure, you're going to make me look that up. It's like, I'll give that to you in just a second. I'll have to look it up. It talks about a certain height and then a certain setback, and then you can have a retaining wall. So is
it that the 7 foot, 3 foot thing
yeah,
that's in the next slide?
yeah.
Oh, it is that. Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's 1744. I will grab it between now and probably after the applicant's presentation. But the key thing to remember is 1754 is more of an aesthetic code. In 1744, the geologic hazard is looking at the structural stability of the wall. And the Planning Commission can allow an adjustment to 1754 and put kind of more aesthetic conditions of approval on it. And that's kind of what that initial request is. Any changes to the geologic hazard will have to come back to you with a variance request.
Okay. And I just want to be clear regarding the ownership of this property. So if this was like a normal housing subdivision, the city would take ownership of the roads that were created in it, correct?
Usually the city
Usually.
does, the applicant does dedicate right away to the city. In this situation, the city did not want to take ownership of that, accepted a private road with public utility and access easements and maintenance.
So that's
I mean,
my
sorry,
next
the
question.
applicant would maintain the road. It would be private with public utility and access easements over it.
So that's my next question. Could a person, I mean, I can't exclude a person from the sidewalk, but these are private sidewalks.
Nope,
So
these are public these are
they're public
privately
sidewalks.
owned and maintained, but public access on the sidewalks,
Okay,
24-hour
who-
public access.
Okay. And I mean, was this going to be one big tax lot that it will never be divided up?
It depends. The applicant can come back with subdivisions or partitions to break it up into smaller lots. If they would, the mixed use downtown zone has pretty flexible dimensional standards. There is a requirement, of course, to ensure that the parcels that within a certain feet of the end of the Oregon Trail are really in a separate tax lot, because any property if any of that property falls within that buffer, then the whole property is affected. So they will come back at a later date with a partition, and that will not need to come back to the Planning Commission.
I guess my concern is that if each individual building gets sold off, who's left to maintain the road if it's not all?
Oh, no, it always, the master plan runs back with the initial owner and applicant. So these conditions of approval will run through any partition or a subdivision application.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And I can answer your retaining wall question real
Oh,
quick.
thanks.
If it's in front of a building, or if there's no building, if it's within the first 40 feet, then it's 3.5 feet. Then you have to step back a couple feet, and then you can do 3.5 feet. If it's next to or behind a building, it's 8.5 feet, 2 feet, 8.5 feet, 2 feet.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else?
All right, I will
was wondering-
stop my, oh, sorry.
I do have some more questions, but I think I'd like to hear from the applicant first.
Okay, I will stop my share and let the applicant share.
Okay, then we will go to the applicant, and you have 15 minutes.
Great, this is Christy White. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. And Christina, if we may use a screen, we may not, but if you can share with Russell from LRS, that would be great. Not sure we're going to need to do that though. So Christy White, land use attorney with the applicant. Also with me is Seth Henderson from Summit Development Group. Sorry. I think we can be relatively brief. We start by saying so much work has been conducted between the applicant and staff over the last 2 weeks, and we're greatly appreciative of that. It's been hard work. Everybody's rolled up their sleeves. And as a result, we've advanced the ball significantly, and we're here tonight and I think ready for a vote, which I think is just reflective of how much good work was done between the parties over the last couple of weeks. As to the emails that have come in today, on testimony regarding really 3 issues, whether the comp plan findings were adequate, questions about the stormwater plan, and questions about the trail plan and the Oregon Trail. I want to concur with City Attorney Richter and her responses to those, as well as to Christina's responses, and then just add the following things. There was actually a stormwater report submitted with the application. It's comprehensive, and it demonstrates that the stormwater treatment and quality will meet the city's most recent stormwater treatment quality design guidelines. We are required under those guidelines to treat the water to city standards prior to discharging. So concerns about the cove and water quality and the Endangered Species Act and lampreys are well taken care of by our compliance with city code on treatment and quality design guidelines prior to discharge. It's also true, of course, as you know, that we've been working with state agency, DEQ, And therefore DEQ and the applicant will be paying close attention to compliance with state standards applicable to development on the site. And then each DDP will have to continue to meet those standards. So we feel like we have a real belt and suspenders approach to meeting any stormwater concerns. As to the end of the Oregon Trail document, I just defer to City Attorney Richter, and her response to that is not an applicable approval criteria, and concur with that. As to the comment about the Oregon City Trails Master Plan, that Trails Master Plan seems to be superseded by the TSP, and our shared use path is the trail that's designated across the site, and of course is being developed as part of this application. So we're necessarily compliant with both the spirit and express language of that master plan. And then there was a comment about not addressing the downtown community plan as another document that was incorporated by reference into the comprehensive plan. Our application actually addresses that comment in full and discuss how the North End Master Plan is designated mixed use downtown, and how neither of those designations really speak necessarily and directly to the landfill. But there's a general section, goal 2.2, and it kind of addresses the end of the Oregon Trail area as a quality place for shopping, living, working, cultural and recreational activities, and social interaction. And then the subsequent rezoning of the property to meet those that terminology in the comp plan. So generally speaking, what happened there is the zoning code implemented the comp plan, and we're in compliance with the zoning code, and therefore we've fully addressed that comprehensive plan policy. And so I think those issues that were raised late today have all been addressed by the record. And because they're addressed by the record, there's really no need for a continuance or leaving the record open. What might be prudent and what we would suggest as one of the options that Christina laid out is hoping to answer all your questions and get to a vote tonight, and then bring back revised findings, just so we can be sure that all of this work in the last 2 weeks has all of its I's dotted and its T's crossed. And we're confident that it's all been pulled together in the most accurate final decision. And with that, I'll turn it over to Seth to see if he has anything to add.
Great job, Christy. No, I'm eager to hear what questions you guys might still have based on the last time we presented. I had heard from some of the commissioners that you guys had additional questions, and we're here as long as necessary to get you comfortable that we've properly addressed the zoning code and have a good plan.
Okay, I appreciate the time, Christine and Seth. At this point, I think, I don't know if we need to split up the questions with traffic or everything else. I think we can just speak freely, and anybody want to put their hand up and ask them any questions, please go ahead. Commissioner Stoll.
Yeah.
This question for the applicant. At the last meeting, there was a request for a change in the, how to word this, the single commercial occupancy percentage, where a single large occupant couldn't be more than a certain percentage. I haven't heard that today. I haven't seen it addressed in the presentation. Is that still a request that you're making, or have you guys abandoned that request?
I can go ahead, Christy.
Go ahead. Okay, thank you for asking that question. One of the reasons that we think we'd like to come back and be sure everything's been cleaned up is to track that condition and other conditions. We believe those changes were incorporated, but it may be a better question post Dina, and then allow us all to clean it up before we come back to you.
And quickly, though, that has been addressed in the revised staff report, which is attached to the agenda.
Okay.
Thank
Great.
you, Christine.
Okay, any other questions? Commissioner Mitchell, was there something else you wanted to ask? You said you might bring it up later.
Yeah, but Commissioner Staggs was ahead of me. He had his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
Question is for Christina, and I'm going to try to roll like 3 questions into one. But first is, what is the height limit on this, in this area?
Sure.
And secondly, when the applicant comes back with the subsequent development plans, submittals as they occur, do they have the ability to build up to that maximum height limit if they want to? Or is that set at the current master plan application that we are tentatively approving tonight?
Those are good questions, and I will refer to I'll look, actually, Laura, can you look up the mixed use downtown? I always say I know the answer, but I want to get my math right. It's 2 places. There's a height restriction if you're within a certain amount of the end of the Oregon Trail, and the applicant does plan on providing a partition to have 2 parcels. And then for the areas outside of that, I believe it's 70 feet. Is that correct, Laura, or 75 feet? And right now, the applicant is intending to meet city code unless specifically specified in the revised condition of approval for the kind of range of uses. And I will bring that up. Let me share my screen. I'm going to go grab the staff report.
Christina, this is Ski with LRS. It is 75 feet outside of that range.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Mhm.
So 1 second, I'm going to grab the, I'm trying to grab the one second, let me share my screen.
And while she's doing that, it's 45 within 500 feet of the end of the Oregon Trail. Is the height limit.
Okay, so if you can you see the revised staff report on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to scroll down and show the revised condition of approval, which shows here we go. So because this was a combination of, we're just going to build to meet the requirements of the zone, but we also want to provide some certainty of what we say we are definitely doing. So it's this kind of combination of what we're committing to, but also we have a lot of flexibility in the mixed use downtown zone, depending on who the future tenants are, and some of the buildings may change slightly, but the street design and kind of the other issues are kind of more set in stone. So the applicant has provided, work with staff to provide kind of these sideboards. And so it says, except as listed below and approved by the Planning Commission, the applicant is required to show compliance. The applicant has to come back to the Planning Commission if any of the following is not met. So if they can show that they meet these A through F, then they don't have to come back to the Planning Commission for an amendment to the master plan. So there can be variations to the height of a building or variations to the slight location of a building if they can show that they still are meeting A through F. And that is, all uses are allowed. It's not specifically a fixed location of structures on site, provided they meet the conditions of approval code and the general locations of the streets. It talks about, they've committed to a certain number of residential units. They actually didn't have to, but they committed to that level of residential units. And then that they, provide that they provide the percentage of the maximum square footage provided in the GDP. And so that kind of is our sideboard. If they can show that they meet the A through F at each DDP, they don't have to come back to an amendment for the master plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I see Commissioner Mitchell has raised his hand.
Yeah, I've got some questions on, and I'm glad you've got the conditions of approval up. Because I do have some questions on some of them, and some of them I'm not sure I'm looking at the current one because we've had a lot of versions flying around.
This is the version that is that was posted in your July 12th agenda. So this is the latest version of the revised.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Condition number 3 says all permitted uses in the mixed-use downtown district are allowed. Condition 7B says all uses not expressly prohibited within the mixed-use design district shall continue to be allowed. Those are two different things. Which is it? Which are we intending for it to be? Those don't mean the same thing. We got a list of permitted uses.
Right. I think as what, and this might just be and I'll let the applicant speak, but this might just be a turn of a phrase. We're trying to identify that item 7 also includes the approved conditional uses. And so maybe I can let the applicant speak if they have a different take on it. But I think we were trying to identify that 7 included the conditional uses that were approved.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely how 7 applies. Can you go back up to 3?
I think 3 is more of just an FYI that, you know, that the applicant has not chosen specific tenants yet. And so any permitted uses in the zone could, you know, be potential tenants for any of these buildings.
Yeah, 3 to me makes sense. I don't have a problem with 3, but saying that all uses that are not expressly prohibited shall continue to be allowed. You know, the list of prohibited uses for this zone is not all that long. So that's not much of a sideboard.
I mean, it could be that, you know, I'll let the applicant comment, but it could just be that a reiteration of above that all permitted uses and conditional uses approved by the Planning Commission shall be continued to be allowed.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense.
I'll let the applicant comment on that, but I think that could be a wordsmith.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. While we're on conditional uses, a gas station would be a conditional use, right?
Correct. And that would have to come back to the Planning Commission.
That would come back to the Planning Commission. Without mentioning names, I can think of a large retailer who typically has a gas station as part of what they do. Would that come before the Planning Commission?
Correct. Because right now the conditional uses are what you see in the plan, which was the small conditional uses drive-throughs. So a gas station drive-through would have to come back to the Planning Commission as a new conditional use.
Okay, good. Keeping that same retailer in mind, they also do tires, and auto repair is a prohibited use. Should that particular retailer come along, would they be allowed to have a tire shop?
We actually answered this with one of the tenants of Home Depot. And I'll maybe pass this to Laura Turway, our Community Development Director with First American Tires. We had an analysis of what is and what is not vehicle repair.
We would likely have an applicant in that case if they had a big box that did include something that could be construed as being not prohibited or not explicitly identified as permitted, for them to explain what they're doing and sort of make an argument. And at that point, they could identify if they want to do a Planning Commission interpretation or if there's a way in our code where it sort of tucks in as an ancillary use. And then we would go through at least some type of public process to identify that logic and verify its correctness. It's a long way of saying we kind of have a precedent, but it's not really a precedent we have to stick to, and each case is individually and be analyzed with its own specific merit.
Okay, but it would come back to a public process. Yeah?
Yes. We don't review business licenses through the public process, but when they go to construct the building, when it's got that tire, if it has a tire component to it, that's the point in which we would seek further clarity and public review.
Okay, thanks. 7E, full built-out site shall have between 500 and 600 residential units. Down in number 9, if the applicant chooses to build standalone residential, minimum density is 17.4 units per acre applies to the site. And I recall that was over 700 units, right?
I believe this is standalone residential.
Yes.
Yeah, this condition of approval just reminds the applicant that they provided a mixed use proposal for a residential mixed use, which does not have the density requirement. If they came back and didn't have any ground floor retail or office and just had full residential units, they would be subject, because that is an underlying zone density requirement.
Okay, okay. Sorry, jumping back up a little bit. 7F, building area within 25% of the maximum. So that could, oh, never mind. Never mind. I read that wrong. Forget that. Sorry. Condition 10. Building, and we're referring to building S2 and C2. No single tenant may occupy more than 85%. That was 70% originally. So this is one of the places where you guys put your heads together and came up with 85, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Okay. The next point, though, this single tenant percentage limitation does not apply to uses that are otherwise permitted outright in the underlying zone. So isn't that saying that a retailer could come along and take 100% of the building because the 85% doesn't apply?
No. Sorry. Go ahead.
If it's over 60,000 square feet, then it's a conditional and it's not outright permitted. So for retail over 60,000 square feet, that's the 85% split. We asked that verbiage be added. So for instance, let's say we were doing indoor entertainment. So indoor entertainment, you can have as large as you want. There isn't a 60,000 square foot limit. So that 85% leasable, I believe Christina's intent was really as it applies to retail. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the conditional use is for retail over 60,000 square feet. So as to reiterate, if there are other permitted uses that are not subject to that conditional use for retail over 60,000 square feet, then this condition doesn't apply. So once again, if an entertainment center moved in, so let's say a movie theater moved into one of the buildings, that is an outright permitted use and is not a conditional use. Now, so not knowing their tenants, if they choose to have a tenant in S2 or C2 that is more than 60,000 square feet of retail, this is the 85% threshold of any individual building.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, a lot of these conditions are really related to not knowing the tenants and trying to think of all the
Right.
different scenarios and variations.
Right. I just want to make sure that the guardrails that we think we're putting up are really well enough. Condition, sorry, 13G. Pedestrian connection to the end of the Oregon Trail Museum shall be constructed by the date of final occupancy of C2. I'm just curious why only that one building. S2, I think, is closer to the end of the Oregon Trail Center. There's another condition in here that the plaza had to be built if 50% of the residential certificate of occupancy. So why did we only say that that pathway has to be built when C2 is built?
I'll defer to the applicant on that because they went through the analysis, and I see also Ms. Turway has her hand up too.
Yeah, I believe, Christina, correct me if I'm wrong, we looked at what potentially may be required to build that connection. And there was a question of whether we would have to engage the county with the adjacent property or the city for an easement in order to build the ADA pathway, and the fact that that may take an extended period of time. So we were trying to build in as much time as possible to build that pathway depending on what is the level of effort required.
Okay, I'm not thrilled with that, but I'm not going to go to war over it either.
I can
Commissioner-
add one piece of that, which is that the end of the Oregon Trail is a charter park, and so I think there was the question about would it be permitted outright? Does it need to go to a vote of the people? So I think there was some larger technical stuff happening there.
Okay.
And also, since I interrupted, and I very much apologize for, we were creeping up on 10 o'clock, and so I want to acknowledge that we'll need approval from the majority of the Planning Commission to sneak any longer past 10, and we can go till 11 at the most.
I'll make a motion that we go until 11 o'clock.
Okay, motion by
Second.
Commissioner Mitchell. Do we have a second? Second by Commissioner Stoll. Do we vote?
Would you like me to call individually or?
Yeah, since I can't see anybody, I think that might be the best way.
Sure. Commissioner Staggs,
Yes.
Commissioner Gage,
Yes.
Commissioner Stoll,
Yes.
Commissioner West,
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
and Chair Schlagenhofer.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay, thanks. I promise I won't talk till 11. Nobody's laughing. Just a question on 13H4, which was added. And I like what you did. Thank you. I think that might have come out some of the comments that I made to Mr. Longo last time. Just curious, 2 elements with a minimum size of 500 feet. Is that each or both?
I'm going to defer to the applicants on that.
Is Kurt Lengo on by chance?
He was.
Is he still around?
I'm here. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that question?
There's a discussion about the all-weather cover along the pedestrian way. And it reads a minimum of 2 elements with a minimum size of 500 square feet. And I'm curious whether that's 500 square feet each or a total of 500 square feet.
I think the intention was those 500 square feet each.
Cool. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Couple more. 16 says that the site can now go 40% above the parking maximum during development. That was 25, but now it's 40. Okay, that's cool. But then it also says that the structured parking does not count on that. So am I understanding that it could be that the surface spaces could be 40% over and the structured parking be built?
Christina, do you want me to jump in here?
Go ahead, Seth.
So the discussion that we had last time was as it particularly related to the one larger format retail, and I believe that's in the, what is that? It's not the south, it's not the central, it's not the north, it's the east district. So
Yes.
in the east district, if you look at how you would actually build out that location, so where you're going to have your storm retention under the parking, the pedestrian, all the piles that are associated, the utilities, etc., it makes sense to build out that district in one portion. The same thing can be said for the North District. So that parking garage ends up being the podium for half to 2/3 of that district. So it's not our intent to overpark the site. It's our intent to build this as efficiently as possible.
Okay. a question, number 37. If it's determined through individual DDP review that public transportation improvements are needed, how is that measured? I guess I think that's probably a staff question.
Sure. You know, we coordinate with TriMet, and we've had background conversations with them. And, you know, at the time of the DDP, each DDP we notice TriMet. And if they feel that a transit stop is warranted, we can condition it and work with the applicant. But what we can't do is condition the applicant to build a TriMet stop without a request from TriMet.
Okay, so that'd be driven by TriMet.
Yeah, and we're in coordination, and it's a timing issue, and they know about our desire to reroute a line through the site, and as TriMet will decide when they're ready to decide that.
Okay. One more, and I think this may be for Mr. Replinger. 79I, oh, excuse me, 79H.
So I'm going to switch to the revised conditions. One second. Okay.
Uh-oh. The numbering changed.
This is the new version as sent today.
Okay, I think you can probably answer this question without having the right one. So the condition says if traffic signal warrants are met and cause the installation of a traffic signal at any of the site access points on Washington Street or Abernathy Road, applicant pays the full cost. My question is, is there a warrant, or how do we account for pedestrian traffic? I mentioned this the other day. There's a chance, hopefully, fingers crossed, that's part of the reason why we really want this development to go, is to trigger a lot of stuff down there. There's a hotel that's approved. Phase 2 of that project is more mixed use. There's a substantial chunk of property owned by the Urban Renewal Agency across the street. We don't know what'll happen with the transfer station. So there could be a ton of pedestrian traffic to get to the other side of the street, to get to a TriMet stop that might be over there or whatever. Are pedestrian counts factored somehow into traffic signal warrants?
The shorter answer is yes, they are. The Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices has a whole series of warrants for installation of traffic signals, and a pedestrian volume warrant is one of those. But also, there are peak hour and 8-hour warrants based on car traffic, and we do consider pedestrians even within the context of that as we look at delays in traffic. So yes, there's a full comprehensive list of warrants, a defined procedure for evaluating, and it could happen.
Okay.
So the intention here is to cause the developer to be on the hook for the whole cost at such time as warrants are met, if they are met.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I think I'm done.
Thank you, Commissioner Mitchell. I'm not seeing any other hands. No, that's Mike's hand. Okay. If your hand is up, I can't see it, so please speak. Okay. Most of my questions have been answered. I guess my biggest concerns were on single tenant building sizes, a single tenant size within a building. So I think those questions have been answered, and I know that we don't want to limit any potential tenants. So if the applicant is comfortable with where we're at with that, and I'm not going to go any further into that. I do have one question. This is more for staff. It has to do with maximum building height. I know we have maximum, like ultimate heights that we can't go above, even with a variance, but can anything project up above a building, like a flagpole, a spire, bit of a sign, anything? Can anything extend up above 75 feet, a small
We do-
tower?
We do have a projection and I can look that up, but it's for every zone. It talks about what projections are allowed above the building height. And I can take a look at that.
Okay, it's not something the applicant has asked for, but
No,
just with the,
And that
Yeah.
would be, those projections are assumed and allowed anywhere if you fall under that. And it's, I think, if I remember correctly, it's things like elevator overrides or mechanical issues or flagpole. I have to look, but yeah, there's some, it's very specific. And so the applicant, if they don't meet that, then they would have to come back to the planning commission if they don't meet our prescribed standards.
okay, yeah, like I said, they weren't asking for it. They weren't
Yeah.
asking for a lightning rod or anything,
No,
but.
no.
I
So
just
they'll
wanted
either
to
build to our
clarify.
zone or come back to you.
Okay. All right. Before we continue, is there anything else? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. Has anybody other than Miss Brittany Spiker asked to participate tonight?
Oh, I think that was mislabeled. It was Christine, the applicant's attorney.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, that was the only public comment we had?
And I provided Paul Edgar a link to the Zoom meeting, but I haven't seen him
Yes.
yet. I just want to confirm that he's not here. I
Okay.
don't see him.
Yeah, I don't see him either. So we have no public comments then?
Not only the ones that were entered into the record this evening.
Okay, all right, the written ones.
Mhm.
Okay, no public testimony. All right. Well, shoot, I mean, does the applicant need the rebuttal time or are we satisfied with where we're at? You do have 5 minutes if there's something else you'd like to say.
We can waive the rebuttal time. There's really a lot of concurrence on where the status of the application and the approval.
I would ask a real quick question to the applicant, which is earlier there was a reference to coming back with final findings. And so sort of how that influences the next steps and if you're asking for a tentative or a final decision, if you have a preference there.
We have a preference to reach a decision and clean up any remaining findings that need to be cleaned up and close the record and bring those findings back.
So I'm hearing that the planning commission, the applicant's request is the planning commission, if they can make a tentative motion to approve the application with the revised conditions as presented by staff this evening, close the record and allow staff to come back with revised findings for adoption at the next planning commission meeting. Is that correct?
Well said.
Well stated. Yeah, exactly.
And if I can add, the applicant has indicated that they are willing to extend the 120-day clock for this period between tonight and when we come back for the adopted findings.
Yes, thank you for adding that.
Is there a specific date, Christina, that you're thinking?
It's 2 weeks from the last one that we did. So I think it was September 9th. That was the last 120. And this is me doing my math. So it'd be the 23rd.
Yeah.
So we could do a planning commission. There's nothing else on the agenda for the next planning commission, which is July 26th. So we could do a quick, it'll be our last Zoom planning commission one on the 26th. If not, we go to August 9th. This is after you guys close the record, by the way. We could go to August 9th. That is what our last item was also continued to. So just being mindful of what else is on that agenda too.
I think July 26th gives us plenty of time.
July 26th. Okay. All right, we can do that. So with that, we will close the public hearing. And then is there anything else anybody would like to bring up before we close the public record? Any comments, deliberations? Okay. Okay, then we'll close the public record and do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay,
I'll make a motion that we approve GLUA 2116 and the associated conditional use and geological hazard. Basically all the applications tonight related to this application.
Clarification, that's a tentative motion with a continuance until July 26th for final findings with the record closed.
So we're making a tentative approval tonight, not a approval?
Yep, that, well, you can make your motion whenever you like. I think the request is a tentative decision. Keep the record closed, do tentative decision, and then because there was all this last minute stuff happening, we want to tie it up in a bow for you so you have the final findings to adopt in 2 weeks.
And I think I provided on this option for option 1, it gives direction to staff that it in our final findings to have the revised conditions as provided in the staff report and revised in the presentation and really in deliberations. And staff will come back and make sure that those are included in the final findings.
Great, thank you.
okay, so the motion will include what Ms. Christine Robertson Gardner just said. And do we have a second?
Second.
Was that Commissioner Mitchell?
Yep.
Okay. All right. We have a motion by Commissioner Staggs, second by Commissioner Mitchell. Call roll.
All right, trying to change up the order this time. Commissioner Stoll.
Aye.
Commissioner Staggs.
Aye.
Commissioner Gage.
Aye.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Aye.
And Chair Schlagenhofer.
Aye.
Motion approved. The item will be continued in 2 weeks.
And the record's closed.
The record's
Yes. And that was July 26th? What was 2 weeks?
That's correct. July 26th. It'll be a Zoom meeting. Yep. And if you wanted to slide into communications, I can tell you that that'll be the only thing on the agenda for July 26th. And that, so we anticipate that to be a quick meeting then. And then we'll see you guys back in person in August for a real life meeting, which we will have options for electronic participation should there be any requests. And then for other communications that are happening, we've been having a couple of late meetings, so we haven't had a chance to do communications. But I just wanted to thank Pete Walter, who is a senior planner here. He's dedicated more than 15 years of his life to help Oregon City and has done a really good job at that and is an expert on many things and been really wonderful. But he has moved on and is no longer with the city. So just public thanks to him. He was great and we wish him well. And then the last item is just a notification that the annexation code amendments were appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals by HBA, though they've identified that they're going to withdraw that appeal. So we were appealed and hopefully that goes away. So that's all I have for communications.
Okay, thank you. I feel like there was something else on last week's agenda. Were there minutes or was that the previous meeting?
You know, we did continue the minutes and we may not have attached them to this agenda. I'll attach them to the next one. So we'll add that to bulk up the agenda there.
Okay. All right. I thought there was something. Okay. Anybody else have anything they wanted to bring up? Commissioner Mitchell.
If anybody's a glutton for punishment, you can listen in tomorrow night. It's a joint work session between, well, no, it's us.
Yeah, it's us.
We have that's right.
Yeah.
Never mind. I had the wrong committee hat on for a second. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. We have another meeting tomorrow night. I forgot about it. Sorry, I'll be quiet.
No, thank you. That should have been in communications. I believe it starts at 6 p.m. instead of 7 p.m. So make sure to pay attention to that time. And yes, we're happy to present our final vision for the comprehensive plan. And once that's done, we will adopt it via resolution. And so this is sort of the last chance after we've done all this public input for over the past year. And then we'll give you a preview of what the next steps for the comprehensive plan process look like. So very exciting work. Thank you to everyone from the Planning Commission that's been participating in that.
And thank you. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for all the hard work and a great meeting tonight. I think we got a lot done, and I'm looking forward to good things in the city. And with that, we're adjourned.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.